Picture this for a second. It is May 7, 1931.
Okay.
And the streets of New York City are literally echoing with the sound of rapid, heavy gunfire.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we are talking about the most sensational manhunt the city had ever seen up to that point. And it's not happening in some remote alleyway either.
Right, it's right out in the open.
Exactly. It's playing out right there on West End Avenue, which is this highly affluent, very fine residential neighborhood.
I mean, you can just imagine the panic.
Absolutely. You have 150 police officers and detectives laying absolute siege to this top floor apartment. They're actually chopping holes in the roof.
No way.
Yeah. Pumping heavy tear gas into the windows. They've literally mounted machine guns on the surrounding residential buildings, and the rat-tat-tat is just deafening.
Which is just cinematic, like a movie scene.
It really is. And there's like 10,000 people gathered on the sidewalks just to watch this massive battle unfold.
And, at the dead center of all this absolute chaos is a man named Two Gun Crowley. He was this notorious killer, just a complete desperado who, ironically enough, didn't smoke or drink.
Wait, really? A mobster who didn't drink?
Yeah, pretty wild detail. But the police commissioner of New York described him as someone who would kill, quote, at the drop of a feather.
Wow.
So he's trapped in this apartment. He's crouching behind an overstuffed armchair, actively bleeding from multiple gunshot wounds, and he is just firing incessantly back at the police.
He is completely cornered, entirely outgunned, and still shooting at the cops.
Yeah.
But here is where we find the absolute core tension of this entire story. Because while he is barricaded in that room, bleeding, Crowley actually takes the time to pull out a pen and write a letter.
In the middle of a shootout.
In the middle of a machine gun shootout. He addresses it to whom it may concern. And the text mentions that the blood from his wounds is literally leaving a crimson trail on the paper as he writes.
That is dark.
Right. Now, if you're watching this on the news, you might think, okay, he's writing a confession.
Sure, or maybe a final desperate apology for the lives he'd taken.
Exactly. But he didn't write an apology. He wrote this, and I quote, "Under my coat is a weary heart, but a kind one that would do nobody any harm."
It is just a staggering level of psychological self-deception.
I mean, a kind heart.
Right, because just a very short time before this massive standoff, Crowley had been parked on a quiet dirt road out on Long Island with his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And a police officer simply walked up to his car and, tapped on the glass to ask to see his license.
Just a routine check.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And without a single word, Crowley drew his gun, shot the officer, jumped out of the car, grabbed the dying officer's own revolver, and shot him again as he lay on the dirt.
It's just brutal.
And yet, sitting in that apartment, smelling the tear gas, he genuinely perceives himself as a kind-hearted victim.
It's completely insane to think about. When he was eventually captured and sent to the death house at Sing Sing prison, his response to the electric chair wasn't, this is what I get for killing people.
Right.
His response on the public record was, this is what I get for defending myself.
Defending himself.
Yeah. And here is the terrifying realization for you, the listener. That exact same psychological blind spot isn't just in cop killers. It is in you, it is in me, and it is in every single person you work with.
That's the uncomfortable truth.
It really is. Because if a literal mobster, a murderer who was just involved in a massive shootout, honestly and truly believes, down to his biological core, that he is a good person who is simply misunderstood,
Right.
then why on earth do you expect your coworkers, your employees, or your family members to just admit it when they are wrong?
It's the ultimate blind spot in human relations, really. We operate under this bizarre, unquestioned assumption that if we just point out someone's error clearly enough,
Logically enough.
exactly, that they will accept it, thank us for the feedback, and immediately change their ways.
Which never happens.
Never. Because human nature, at a fundamental neurological level, simply does not work that way.
Which is exactly what we are tearing apart today. Welcome to this deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Over the next hour, we are exploring the legendary foundational chapter of Dale Carnegie's masterwork. Specifically, the chapter titled, "If You Want to Gather Honey, Don't Kick Over the Beehive."
It's such a great title.
It is. And our mission today is simple, but incredibly profound. You are going to learn the biological, evolutionary flaw in human criticism.
We are going to unpack the mechanics of why mastering the art of not complaining is the ultimate cheat code.
Yes, a cheat code for anyone interested in business, entrepreneurship, or just navigating human relationships without causing unnecessary explosions.
And we really need to emphasize right up front that Carnegie didn't just pull these ideas out of thin air as some sort of, I don't know, feel-good philosophy.
Right. This isn't just positive thinking fluff.
Not at all. He spent years meticulously researching the lives of great historical leaders, analyzing human behavior, and testing these principles in what he called a laboratory of human relationship.
A laboratory. I love that.
And the very first principle he establishes, the absolute bedrock of getting people to cooperate with you, starts with understanding the complete and utter futility of criticism.
So let's stick with the criminal underworld for a second to really cement this idea, because the Crowley story isn't some weird, isolated incident.
Far from it. I mean, look at Al Capone.
Oh, yeah?
He was America's most notorious public enemy, right? The most sinister, violent gang leader who ever shot up Chicago.
The ultimate mobster.
But Capone didn't condemn himself. In fact, he gave an interview where he stated, "I have spent the best years of my life giving people the lighter pleasures, helping them have a good time, and all I get is abuse. The existence of a hunted man."
Wait, he actually said he was giving people the lighter pleasures?
He genuinely did.
Yeah.
He actively regarded himself as an unappreciated and misunderstood public benefactor.
It's mind-blowing. It really is. And Dutch Schultz, another infamous mobster whose entire empire was built on violence and extortion, said the exact same thing on a newspaper interview before he was gunned down in Newark.
Well-
He literally claimed to be a public benefactor. And the craziest part is, the psychological evidence suggests he fully believed it.
This specific phenomenon was heavily confirmed by Lewis Laws, too.
Remind us who that is.
He served as the warden of New York's infamous Sing Sing prison for many years.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, Carnegie corresponded with Laws, who stated unequivocally that very few of the criminals in Sing Sing regarded themselves as bad men.
That is wild to think about from a warden's perspective.
Laws said they're just as human as you and I. They rationalize, they explain, they will tell you exactly why they had to crack a safe or pull a trigger.
They always have a reason.
Always. Most of them use some form of reasoning, whether logically sound or completely fallacious, to justify their antisocial acts, even to themselves.
So they stoutly maintain they should never have been imprisoned at all.
Exactly.
Okay, I have to jump in here and push back a little. Because I get that criminals might be delusional, right? They are living in violent, extreme life or death circumstances where their survival kind of depends on cognitive distortion. But surely, in a normal professional business setting, rational people take accountability, right?
You think so?
Like if I'm a manager and I point out a massive data error in a quarterly report to a VP of sales, I expect them to look at the data and say, yes, my mistake, the math is wrong, I will fix it.
It sounds so simple when you say it like that.
I mean, it feels like when we criticize someone in the workplace, we are just pressing a button on a computer that is supposed to execute a command to fix a bug.
And that right there is the exact trap every failing manager falls into.
Really?
Yes, because we assume we are dealing with creatures of logic, but we aren't. We are dealing with creatures of emotion.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Let's break down the science of what is actually happening when you offer that criticism.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of cognitive dissonance?
Yeah, it's like when your brain holds two conflicting ideas.
Yeah. Exactly. It's the psychological tension you feel when your brain holds two conflicting truths. So, for the VP of sales, truth A is, I am a smart, competent executive.
Okay.
Truth B, which is introduced by your criticism, is, I made a stupid, careless mistake that cost the company money.
And the brain hates that conflict.
It literally cannot handle the psychological pain of that contradiction. So the ego acts like an incredibly aggressive immune system.
Oh, that's a great way to put it, an immune system.
It immediately invents a delusion or a deflection to protect itself. The VP won't say, I'm incompetent. They will say, well, the accounting department gave me late numbers, or the software is glitchy, or...
You didn't give me enough time to review it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
B.F. Skinner, the world-famous Harvard psychologist, proved this through extensive operant conditioning experiments.
The guy with the rats and pigeons, right?
That's the one. He demonstrated that an animal rewarded for good behavior will learn much more rapidly and retain what it learns far more effectively than an animal punished for bad behavior.
So it's like trying to teach a dog a new trick by hitting it with a rolled-up newspaper.
Exactly.
The dog doesn't actually learn the trick, right? Its brain goes into pure survival mode, its amygdala lights up, and all it learns is to fear the newspaper.
Yes. And you're saying that in humans, criticism triggers that exact same evolutionary survival instinct, just protecting the ego instead of the physical body.
Wow.
Precisely. The ego is as vital to a human sense of self as physical safety is to a dog.
That makes so much sense.
When you criticize someone, their prefrontal cortex, the logical reasoning part of the brain, essentially shuts down, and the amygdala takes over.
So they literally aren't even hearing the logic anymore.
No, they are no longer processing the data error in the report. They are actively defending their identity against a perceived attack. As the great endocrinologist Hans Selye said, as much as we thirst for approval, we dread condemnation.
We dread condemnation.
Criticism puts a person immediately on the defensive. It almost forces them to strive to justify themselves.
It's like pressing a button on a computer that you know for a biological fact is going to crash the system, but you press it anyway because it feels good in the moment to vent your own frustration.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. You are prioritizing your momentary emotional release over the actual outcome you want to achieve.
Because it does feel good to be right.
It does. But it wounds their precious pride, it hurts their sense of importance, and it arouses a resentment that can last for years.
Years over one comment.
So, whether you are dealing with a mobster on death row or a middle manager in a cubicle, expecting someone to logically and humbly accept harsh criticism goes completely against human biology.
99 times out of 100, people do not criticize themselves for anything, no matter how profoundly wrong they may be.
Never.
So the fundamental takeaway for the listener here is that criticism is just pragmatically futile.
It simply does not work as a tool for behavioral change.
And if you think this only applies to the criminal underworld or the stubborn coworker in the cubicle next to yours, let's zoom out.
Let's do it.
Let's look at what happens when you put this specific biological flaw in the highest offices in the land. Because wounded pride has literally altered the course of world history.
It absolutely has. There's a brilliant case study in the sources regarding the famous political feud between Theodore Roosevelt and President William Howard Taft.
Oh, this is a crazy story.
It perfectly illustrates how criticism destroys powerful alliances. So back in 1908, when Roosevelt was stepping out of the White House, he threw his immense political weight behind Taft.
He effectively handpicked him as his successor.
Exactly, helping him get elected as president. Then Roosevelt went off to Africa on a massive lion hunting safari, feeling pretty good about the state of the country.
Sounds like a nice retirement. But when he came back to America, he was not happy.
He was furious. He felt Taft had become far too conservative.
Right.
He felt Taft had entirely strayed from Roosevelt's progressive policies and was undoing his legacy. So Roosevelt did what human nature dictates. He exploded.
He didn't just disagree privately.
No, he denounced Taft publicly, viciously, and relentlessly in the press. He even tried to secure the Republican nomination for a third term himself to oust Taft.
Wow.
And when the party bosses blocked him, Roosevelt formed his own third party, the famous Bull Moose Party.
Which mathematically completely split the Republican voter base.
Exactly. He all but demolished the GOP in a fit of righteous criticism.
It's amazing how fast friends can become enemies over policy.
In the 1912 election, William Howard Taft and the incumbent Republican Party carried only 2 states, Vermont and Utah.
That is brutal.
It was the most disastrous, humiliating defeat the party had ever known. And what was the historical consequence?
It handed the White House directly to Woodrow Wilson, a Democrat.
Yes, who subsequently altered the flow of global history, the League of Nations, and America's entry into the First World War.
And Roosevelt blamed Taft for everything. He criticized him to the absolute maximum degree. But we have to ask the psychological question here. Did all that public criticism, all those fiery speeches and newspaper columns, make Taft suddenly realize he was wrong?
Not at all.
Did he sit in the Oval Office and say, you know what, Teddy makes a great point. I have been too conservative. I messed up.
Of course not. It just wounded him. Taft was personally devastated by the betrayal of his friend, but he didn't blame himself for the political rift.
He still thought he was right.
With tears in his eyes, Taft simply defended his own logic, saying, I don't see how I could have done any differently from what I have.
I don't see how I could have done any differently. That is the universal human defense mechanism speaking right there.
It really is.
It is the exact same sentiment as Two Gun Crowley saying, I was just defending myself.
Exactly.
The context changes, but the ego's defense is identical.
Yeah.
And we see the exact same blind rationalization in the Teapot Dome scandal.
Oh, this is another huge one.
Which was essentially the biggest political scandal in America before Watergate. You had Albert B. Fall, the Secretary of the Interior under President Warren G. Harding. He was entrusted with government oil reserves at Elk Hill and Teapot Dome. But instead of allowing competitive bidding like he was supposed to, He handed a massive, incredibly lucrative contract outright to his personal friend, Edward L. Dehoney.
Just gave it to his buddy.
Yep. And in return, Dehoney gave Secretary Fall a so-called loan of $100,000 in a little black bag.
Which was an astronomical sum of money in the early 1920s.
Life-changing money.
It was a blatant, undeniable, completely illegal bribe. And Fall went to extreme, almost tyrannical lengths to protect it, even ordering United States Marines into the district to drive off competing oil extractors at gunpoint.
Using the Marines.
When the lid finally blew off the scandal, the fallout was apocalyptic. It ruined the Harding administration, it sickened the entire nation, and ultimately put Albert B. Fall behind federal prison bars.
He was condemned viciously by every newspaper, every politician, and the entire voting public.
He was universally hated.
So surely, sitting in a prison cell, having utterly disgraced his president and his country, Albert Fall repented, right? The weight of a nation's criticism must have broken through that ego.
Never. He never repented a single day.
Unbelievable.
Years later, Herbert Hoover implied in a public speech that President Harding's untimely death had been due to mental anxiety and worry because a friend had betrayed him.
Meaning Fall.
Right. And when Mrs. Fall, Albert's wife, heard that speech, she sprang from her chair, wept uncontrollably, shook her fists at fate, and screamed,
"What? Harding betrayed by Fall? No, my husband never betrayed anyone. His whole house full of gold would not tempt my husband to do wrong. He is the one who's been betrayed and led to the slaughter and crucified."
Human nature in action.
Wrongdoers blaming everybody but themselves, building these massive fortresses of rationalization.
And honestly, it is so incredibly easy for us to sit here decades later and judge them. We think we are above it.
We always think we're above it. But the sources provide this incredibly self-deprecating anecdote about Dale Carnegie himself that shows how susceptible we all are to this exact trap.
I love this story because it shows Carnegie was human, too.
Yes. When Carnegie was much younger and trying to make a name for himself as a writer, he wrote a letter to Richard Harding Davis,
Who was a very prominent, highly successful, and incredibly busy author at the time.
Exactly. Carnegie was doing a magazine article about authors and wanted to ask about Davis's specific writing methods.
But Carnegie was insecure, and he wanted to sound important to this famous author.
Naturally.
He had recently received a letter from someone else, some corporate executive, that had the notation "dictated but not read" at the very bottom.
Dictated but not read.
He thought that made the sender sound incredibly busy, powerful, and prestigious.
Right. So Carnegie, who was basically a nobody at the time and not busy at all, ended his short little note to this famous author with the words, "dictated but not read."
Just totally faking it.
It was completely, utterly pretentious.
And Richard Harding Davis did not take kindly to it at all. He didn't even bother to answer the questions in the letter.
Oh, no.
He simply scribbled a note across the bottom of Carnegie's own letter and mailed it right back to him.
What did it say?
It said, "Your bad manners are exceeded only by your bad manners."
Ouch.
Yeah,
I mean, that is just a devastatingly good comeback.
it really is.
And Carnegie admits in the text, he writes, "True, I had blundered and perhaps I deserved this rebuke." He knew he was factual in the wrong.
He knew it was pretentious.
But because he was human, his amygdala fired up,
Yeah,
and he deeply resented the criticism.
naturally.
In fact, he resented it so sharply that 10 years later, a full decade, when he read in the morning newspaper that Richard Harding Davis had died, the very first thought that popped into his head wasn't about the man's literary legacy or his tragic passing.
No, it wasn't.
It was the lingering, burning sting of that hurt pride. For 10 years, he held a bitter grudge over a piece of feedback that he fully acknowledged was correct.
And this raises such a critical question for the listener to consider in their own life. If you criticize someone tomorrow, even if you are 100% justified, even if you are factually, logically, and morally right, are you prepared to deal with a resentment that might literally last a decade?
Most people don't think about the long-term cost.
Exactly. Criticisms are like homing pigeons. They always return home. The person you condemn will almost always find a way to justify themselves and condemn you in return, permanently damaging your ability to work with them.
It's a highly destructive force. The text mentions that bitter criticism drove Thomas Hardy, arguably one of the finest English novelists to ever live, to give up writing fiction entirely after the backlash to Jude the Obscure.
Yes, quit completely.
Yeah, it drove the brilliant young English poet Thomas Chatterton to actual suicide. It's not just feedback. To the human brain, it is a literal attack on someone's identity.
So this creates a massive paradox.
Right.
If criticism is out of the question, if it's a biologically flawed strategy that only breeds resentment and shuts down the learning centers of the brain, how do the most effective leaders in history handle massive, catastrophic failures from their team?
How do you lead? How do you manage without kicking over the beehive?
Right, because you still have to correct mistakes.
And that is the perfect pivot to our next exploration, the secret weapon of the greats. Specifically, the incredible, almost superhuman self-restraint and empathy of Abraham Lincoln.
This is such a fascinating case study.
I love this part of the deep dive because Lincoln wasn't born with this saint-like patience. We think of him on the $5 bill as this stoic, perfectly calm leader.
Always wise and measured.
Right. But as a young man in the Pigeon Creek Valley of Indiana, he was highly critical. He was petty.
He really was.
He used to write these scathing letters and poems mocking people in town, and he would literally drop them on country roads where he knew they would be found by the public.
He's the 19th century equivalent of a toxic internet troll.
Exactly. And that toxic habit escalated when he became a practicing lawyer in Springfield, Illinois. He attacked his political opponents openly in sarcastic letters published in the local newspapers.
It was his signature move.
But in the autumn of 1842, he pushed it way too far. He wrote an anonymous letter ridiculing a very vain, pugnacious Irish politician named James Shields.
And Shields was not a guy you wanted to mess with.
No. The letter was published, the whole town roared with laughter at Shields' expense, but Shields was absolutely furious.
He's out for blood.
He hired detectives, found out Lincoln wrote it, jumped on his horse, tracked Lincoln down, and formally challenged him to a duel.
A literal fight to the death. Over a sarcastic letter.
It's crazy to think about.
Yeah.
And Lincoln didn't want to fight. He was fundamentally opposed to dueling, but his pride and his political honor were on the line. He couldn't back down.
Right.
Because he was the one challenged, he had the choice of weapons. And because he had these incredibly long, gangly arms, he actually chose cavalry broadswords.
Broadswords. Not
Yeah.
pistols, broadswords.
He literally went and took lessons in sword fighting from a West Point graduate just to prepare for this.
He was ready to chop a guy up.
And on the appointed day, they met on a sandbar in the Mississippi River, fully prepared to hack each other to death over a bruised ego.
Over pride.
Thankfully, at the very last minute, their seconds intervened and managed to stop the duel.
And that specific event was the most lurid, terrifying personal incident in Lincoln's life.
I bet.
It fundamentally rewired his brain. It taught him an invaluable lesson in the dark art of dealing with people and the lethal danger of wounded pride.
He realized it could literally get him killed.
From that day on the sandbar forward, he never again wrote an insulting letter. He never publicly ridiculed anyone, and he almost never criticized anybody for anything, recognizing that it only breeds deadly enemies.
Which, again, is incredibly easy to say when things are going well and you're just practicing law in Springfield.
Sure.
But let's fast forward to the American Civil War. Lincoln is now president. The entire nation is tearing itself apart in the bloodiest conflict in American history.
The pressure he was under is just unimaginable.
And time after time, Lincoln puts a new general at the head of the Army of the Potomac, McClellan, Pope, Burnside, Hooker, Meade.
And each one of them, in turn, blunders tragically.
They make catastrophic tactical errors that cost tens of thousands of young lives and drive Lincoln to literally pace the floor of the White House in absolute despair, crying out to God.
And half the nation is savagely condemning these generals in the press.
Calling for their heads, demanding Lincoln fire them and publicly shame them.
Yet, amidst all that agonizing pressure, Lincoln held his peace. His favorite quotation during those dark years became, "Judge not that ye be not judged."
Judge not that ye be not judged.
When his own wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, and others spoke harshly of the Southern people, calling them monsters or traitors, Lincoln would reply, "Don't criticize them. They're just what we would be under similar circumstances."
That is just profound, radical empathy.
He understood that the environment shapes the behavior. But the ultimate, supreme test of this restraint, the crucible of his leadership, came in July 1863 at the Battle of Gettysburg.
This is the absolute climax of this concept. The first 3 days of July see massive, unprecedented bloodshed at Gettysburg.
Right.
During the night of July 4th, Confederate General Robert E. Lee begins to retreat southward with his defeated, battered army. But massive storm clouds deluged the entire country with rain.
It was a torrential downpour.
When Lee reaches the Potomac River, he finds it swollen, raging, and completely impassable. He is trapped. The victorious Union Army is right behind him.
He has nowhere to go.
Lincoln sees this unfolding from Washington and realizes this is a heaven-sent, miraculous opportunity. The war could end right here today if they capture Lee's trapped army.
So Lincoln, seeing the endgame, orders Union General George Meade to attack Lee immediately. He tells him explicitly via telegraph not to call a council of war, just to attack while the enemy is vulnerable.
He was very clear about that. No councils.
Lincoln even sends a special messenger on horseback to demand immediate, decisive action. It is the single most critical juncture of the entire war.
And what does General Meade do? He does the exact opposite.
Unbelievable.
In direct, blatant violation of the president's explicit orders, he calls a council of war. He hesitates, he procrastinates, he telegraphs a bunch of weak excuses back to Washington.
Just stalling.
He flat out refuses to attack, and finally, the floodwaters recede, and Lee and his army safely escape over the Potomac.
The golden opportunity is lost.
And the war is going to drag on for years longer, costing hundreds of thousands more lives.
Lincoln was absolutely furious. It was a level of rage he rarely experienced.
I can't even imagine.
He cried out to his son Robert, "Great God, what does this mean? We had them within our grasp and had only to stretch forth our hands, and they were ours. If I had gone up there, I could have whipped him myself."
He was ready to go fight him himself.
In bitter, agonizing disappointment, Lincoln sat down at his desk and wrote a devastating letter to General Meade. Remember, Lincoln was usually very restrained, so for him, this letter was the ultimate crushing rebuke.
He wrote, "My dear General, I do not believe you appreciate the magnitude of the misfortune involved in Lee's escape. He was within our easy grasp, and to have closed upon him would, in connection with our other late successes, have ended the war.
So true.
As it is, the war will be prolonged indefinitely. Your golden opportunity is gone, and I am distressed immeasurably because of it."
It is a career-ending letter. It is logically sound, factually accurate, perfectly articulated, and entirely justified by military protocol.
But wait, I need to pause you here.
Okay.
Because this is where the story takes a turn that defies modern management logic. Meade never saw that letter.
No, he didn't.
Lincoln didn't send it. It was found among his papers after his assassination. And I have to ask, why? Why on earth wouldn't he send it? Meade deserved it.
He absolutely deserved it.
If you don't send it, aren't you just letting incompetence slide? Doesn't sending it hold Meade accountable and force him to realize the magnitude of his mistake so he doesn't do it again?
It is the most natural reaction in the world to want to send it for the sake of, quote, accountability.
Right.
But this is where Lincoln's absolute genius in human relations shines, and where we have to separate emotional venting from strategic outcomes.
Okay, walk me through it.
If we pause and reverse engineer Lincoln's probable thought process, it goes something like this. First, he taps into that radical empathy.
Empathy for Meade.
Yes. He realizes that he is sitting in the quiet, pristine safety of the White House. Meade has just spent a week seeing literal rivers of blood at Gettysburg.
That's a good point.
The trauma. His ears are pierced with the screams of the dying. If Lincoln had Meade's timid temperament and had seen the horrors Meade just saw, maybe he wouldn't be so anxious to charge back into the slaughter either.
So he empathizes with the trauma. But what about the strategy?
Exactly. The strategy is the second part. Lincoln realizes the pragmatic result of sending the letter. Sending it would relieve Lincoln's feelings. It would make Lincoln feel better to vent his anger.
It would feel great for about 5 minutes.
But what would it actually do to Meade? It wouldn't make Meade a better general. It would make Meade justify himself.
He'd blame the rain, the troops.
He would condemn Lincoln for being an armchair quarterback. It would arouse hard feelings, completely impair Meade's further usefulness as a commander, and perhaps force him to resign from the army entirely right when the Union still needed him.
Oh, wow.
Lincoln realized that the criticism, no matter how profoundly justified, would only serve to sabotage their ultimate shared goal of winning the war. It's a masterclass in executive self-control.
It's prioritizing the mission over your own ego.
And it provides a highly practical, actionable takeaway for all of us today. When you are boiling with rage over a colleague's mistake, when that junior developer crashes the servers, or sales blows a massive pitch, write the angry email.
Write it out.
Open a blank document and type it all out. Get all the venom and frustration out of your system.
Yeah.
Mark Twain, the famous author, used to do this all the time.
Mark Twain.
Yeah. When someone made him furious, he would write these incredibly savage letters saying things like, "The thing for you is a burial permit. You have only to speak and I will see that you get it."
I love that. The burial permit line is gold.
Or he'd write to an editor and say that a proofreader had a decayed brain and needed to be fired immediately.
Just ruthless.
It made Twain feel vastly better. It allowed his amygdala to cool down because he articulated the anger. But the letters didn't do any real harm because his wife, Olivia, secretly intercepted them.
She hid them.
She pulled them out of the mail stack. They were never actually sent. The lesson for the listener is this. Write it to blow off steam, but never ever click send.
That is so practical.
Keep a $5 bill on your desk. Look at the picture of Lincoln and ask yourself, how would Lincoln handle this specific problem if he had it?
Okay, that is a fantastic strategy for self-regulation, but it brings up a very practical dilemma for the listener.
What's that?
Well, it's great to talk about the Civil War, and holding on to a letter is fine when the moment has passed. But what about the modern workplace where the behavior is ongoing?
Right.
If you are a factory manager or a safety coordinator or a parent, you still have to correct bad behavior. If someone is actively doing something dangerous or detrimental, I can't just ignore it.
Of course not.
How do you actually get someone to fix a mistake without triggering that massive defensive mechanism we've been talking about?
And that is the exact pivot we need to make. We've established what not to do. Now we need to look at correction without condemnation.
Correction without condemnation. I like that.
The psychological secret is that you can change behavior and ensure a long-term compliance by focusing entirely on the other person's comfort, their needs, and their future potential, rather than attacking their past mistakes.
Focus on the future, not the past.
You have to remove the threat to their ego so their logical brain can stay engaged.
Let's bring in a modern example from the sources. There's a brilliant case study about George B. Johnston. He was the safety coordinator for an engineering company, and his primary job was to make sure employees wore their hard hats in the field.
Right, a classic safety compliance issue.
Initially, he did what almost every manager in history does. He used his authority, he leaned on the rules. When he saw someone without a hat, he would confront them, cite the company safety regulation, and tell them they must comply immediately.
And what happened?
He got sullen, resentful acceptance. The workers would begrudgingly put the hat on while he was watching, but the minute he walked away, they would take it right back off.
Because the focus of his intervention was entirely on his authority and their disobedience.
Right.
By citing the rule, he was essentially saying, I am in charge and you are wrong. It triggered their resistance. It threatened their autonomy.
So Johnson realized this wasn't working and changed his approach entirely.
What did he do?
The next time he saw workers out in the field without their hard hats, he didn't cite the rules. He didn't act like a cop. Instead, he asked a question.
He asked a question.
Yeah, he walked up and asked if the hats were uncomfortable or if they didn't fit properly. Then he gently reminded them, in a pleasant conversational tone, that the hat was specifically designed to protect them from serious injury and suggested they wear it for their own safety.
And I bet the result was entirely different.
The result: compliance skyrocketed and there was zero resentment. He shifted the focus from, you are breaking my rule and making me look bad, to, I care about your physical well-being.
Exactly. He bypassed the ego's defense mechanism. And the stakes can be much, much higher than just wearing a hard hat on a construction site.
Oh, definitely.
The source text shares an absolutely incredible story about Bob Hoover, who was a famous test pilot and frequent performer at massive air shows.
A test pilot, so zero margin for error.
None. He was flying a World War II-era propeller plane back to Los Angeles at about 300 feet in the air, when suddenly both engines just stopped dead. Complete silence.
At 300 feet?
Yeah. Through absolute sheer skill and incredibly deft maneuvering, he managed to land the plane in a dry wash. The landing gear was ripped off, the plane was badly damaged, but miraculously, nobody was hurt.
That is terrifying.
When he got out and inspected the plane on the ground, he found out exactly what had happened. It wasn't a mechanical failure.
What was it?
The young mechanic at the airfield had fueled this vintage propeller plane with jet fuel instead of aviation gasoline.
Oh, man.
It was a catastrophic, completely negligent mistake that destroyed an incredibly expensive historical aircraft and very nearly cost 3 people their lives.
Okay.
Now put yourself in Hoover's shoes. The adrenaline is still pumping. He had every right in the world to unleash the ultimate career-ending tongue lashing.
Anyone would.
The young mechanic who made the mistake was already sick with agony. Tears were streaming down his face as Hoover approached. He knew he had messed up horribly. He knew he almost killed his hero.
Yeah.
But Hoover didn't scold him. He didn't yell. He didn't even criticize him. Instead, Hoover walked up, put his arm around the weeping mechanic's shoulder, and said, "To show you I'm sure that you'll never do this again, I want you to service my F-51 tomorrow."
Okay, hold on. I need to pause you right there.
Go ahead.
Because I am genuinely struggling with this Bob Hoover story.
A lot of people do.
As a leader, if I'm in his shoes and a guy destroys a multi-million-dollar aircraft and almost kills me because of sheer carelessness,
Right.
my instinct isn't to hug him and give him the keys to my next plane. My instinct is to fire him on the spot, maybe even press charges. Isn't Hoover just actively rewarding incompetence here? Where is the line between having grace and just being an enabler of terrible work?
It's a completely valid pushback, and it's the exact question every leader asks when they hear this story. But we have to look at the psychological mechanics of what Hoover is trying to achieve.
Okay, lay it on me.
Hoover recognized that the mechanic was already punishing himself. The mechanic's ego was already crushed. He knew the severity of the mistake. Yelling at him wouldn't teach him anything he didn't already know.
That's true. He already felt terrible.
The goal for Hoover wasn't retribution. It wasn't about making the guy feel bad to satisfy Hoover's anger. The goal was rehabilitation.
Rehabilitation.
Yes, if Hoover fires him, that mechanic leaves the industry forever, ruined by one mistake. By offering him the F-51 tomorrow, Hoover is rebuilding the man's confidence. He is securing a level of future loyalty and meticulous diligence that no amount of yelling could ever buy. That mechanic will never ever make a fueling mistake again because Hoover bound him with trust instead of fear.
Wow. That actually makes complete sense. He traded a momentary vent of anger for a lifetime of loyal, flawless service.
Yeah.
It reminds me of Benjamin Franklin. Franklin was famously tactless and argumentative in his youth. He was constantly correcting people and making enemies.
He was known for being pretty abrasive early on.
Right. But he realized it was holding him back, so he transformed his interpersonal approach so thoroughly that he eventually became the American ambassador to France, navigating incredibly complex international diplomacy.
A massive turnaround.
And his stated secret was remarkably simple. I will speak ill of no man and speak all the good I know of everybody. It takes immense character, deep empathy, and profound self-control to be understanding and forgiving. As the text notes, any fool can criticize, condemn, and complain, and most fools do.
The practical, actionable takeaway here is crystal clear. The next time someone on your team messes up, whether they botch a presentation or enter the wrong code, instead of asserting your authority or pointing out the obvious flaw, ask questions.
Like the safety coordinator with the hard hats.
Right. Focus on how to protect them, how to help them improve, or how to remove friction from their process. Give them a chance to redeem themselves without losing face.
Which is such a powerful transformative tool in business. But this deep dive isn't just about how you act in the boardroom or on the factory floor.
No, it's bigger than that.
The true test of this principle happens when you clock out. We need to bring this discussion into the most intimate, vulnerable sphere of your life, your home.
Which brings us to a really emotional pivot in the text. Understanding the root of our critical nature with the people we love.
Yeah, this part hit me hard.
We frequently measure others by the yardstick of our own years and our own experience. We expect adult perfection instead of recognizing their developing humanity. And tragically, this happens most often with the people we care about the most.
The text includes a really poignant, almost heartbreaking breakdown of a classic piece of American journalism by W. Livingston Larned titled Father Forgets.
It's a beautiful piece of writing.
It paints this incredibly vivid, emotional scene. It's late at night, and a father sneaks into his sleeping son's bedroom. The boy is asleep, his little paw crumpled under his cheek, his blonde curls damp on his forehead.
Just a peaceful image.
And the father is standing there over the bed, completely overwhelmed by a stifling, suffocating wave of remorse.
Because of how he treated him earlier.
Right. He is standing there recounting the events of the day, realizing with horror that he'd spent the entire day finding fault. He scolded the boy while he was dressing for not washing his face properly. He took him to task for not cleaning his shoes. He yelled at him for throwing his things on the floor.
Just nitpicking everything.
At breakfast, he found fault with how the boy ate, how he put his elbows on the table, even how thick he spread the butter on his bread. When the boy left for play and called out, "Goodbye, Daddy," The father just frowned and yelled, "Hold your shoulders back,"
It just kept going, an endless barrage of micro-criticisms.
all day long. In the afternoon, he humiliated the boy in front of his friends for getting holes in his stockings. And later, when the father was reading in the library, the boy came in timidly, clearly wanting affection.
Yeah.
The father snapped at him over his paper for interrupting. But the boy just ran across the room, threw his arms around his dad's neck, kissed him with all the frantic affection of a child, and ran upstairs.
Yeah.
The boy's love was completely unbothered by the constant barrage of criticism.
And that is when the terrifying realization hits the father in the dark bedroom. He asks himself, what has habit been doing to me? The habit of finding fault, of reprimanding.
The habit of it.
Right. He realizes he wasn't doing it because he didn't love the boy. He was doing it because he expected too much of youth. He was unconsciously measuring a child by the yardstick of his own adult years.
Expecting him to be a mini-adult.
Exactly. He was demanding that a little boy act with the precision, maturity, and situational awareness of a grown man, entirely ignoring the boy's spontaneous, dawn-sized heart.
And we need to bridge this directly to you, the listener. Maybe today in your life, it's not holes in stockings or a kid playing marbles.
Sure.
Today, it's a junior developer pushing broken code to production, or an intern messing up a coffee order, or your teenager forgetting to take out the trash while staring at their phone.
It happens every day.
The context changes, but our reaction, expecting a kid or a rookie to automatically possess our level of context, our exact priorities, and our years of hard-won experience is exactly the same. We constantly condemn people for not being us. We judge them by a yardstick they literally haven't grown into yet.
It is the ultimate failure of empathy. Instead of condemning people for not meeting our internalized, often unspoken standards, we need to try to understand them.
We have to try.
We need to try to figure out why they do what they do. What is their context? What are they seeing that we aren't? That exercise in empathy is infinitely more profitable and intriguing than lazy criticism, and it actively breeds sympathy, tolerance, and kindness.
Which is so much harder, but so much better.
Dr. Samuel Johnson, the great English writer, famously said, God himself, sir, does not propose to judge man until the end of his days.
So why should you and I act like we have the authority to do it right now? It goes back to that brilliant Confucius quote. Don't complain about the snow on your neighbor's roof when your own doorstep is unclean. We have to pause, recognize our own flaws, and extend grace to the people around us.
If we synthesize everything we've unpacked today, if we tie all these narratives together into one core, undeniable truth, from Two-Gun Crowley bleeding in that besieged apartment, to President Taft crying over a lost friendship, to Abraham Lincoln gripping a furious letter he would never send, to a father standing guiltily over his sleeping son, one clear, memorable insight emerges.
The soul of the chapter.
Yes, representing the absolute soul of this entire chapter. Human beings are fundamentally and biologically emotional creatures.
Yeah.
We are bristling with prejudice, and we are motivated almost entirely by pride and vanity.
Emotional, not logical.
Expecting pure logic and humble accountability from an emotional creature whose ego is under attack is a recipe for endless frustration.
Criticism is, ultimately, a selfish, self-indulgent act. It serves only one real purpose, to relieve your own stress and vent your own anger.
And it costs you dearly.
It does, because in exchange for that brief, fleeting moment of relief, you completely destroy your ability to influence the other person. You trigger their evolutionary defenses, you deeply wound their pride, and you guarantee that they will dig their heels in and resent you.
It's guaranteed.
If you want to gather the honey of cooperation, the honey of loyalty, and the honey of true, lasting success, you simply cannot kick over the beehive of human pride.
That is the bedrock foundation of all successful human relations. It is principle one: don't criticize, condemn, or complain.
Don't criticize, condemn, or complain.
It requires immense character and incredible self-control to be understanding and forgiving, but it is the absolute only way to genuinely influence another human being without leaving a bitter trail of destruction behind you.
We've spent this entire deep dive learning why kicking the beehive is a terrible idea and why criticizing people is biologically and historically doomed to fail. But that leaves a pretty massive, glaring question hanging in the air for all of us.
It definitely does.
If you can't criticize, if you can't demand compliance, and if you can't force people to do what you want them to do through authority, how exactly do you get the honey?
That is the multi-million-dollar question. If the stick doesn't work, what does?
Join us on our next deep dive as we uncover the single, almost magical psychological secret to making anyone actually want to do exactly what you need them to do.
What if there was uh, only one way under high heaven to get anybody to do anything? And I truly, just one single way.
Right.
Not by force, not by, threats, but by tapping into a psychological hunger so deep, so profound, that it literally separates us from the animal kingdom.
Yeah, it's a bold claim.
It really is. Because usually when we think about influence, we picture, like, a power dynamic. We picture the metaphorical revolver to the ribs, or the threat of a firing, or the raised voice of a boss. We think of leverage.
Oh, absolutely. It's the ultimate illusion of control. We operate under this assumption that if we just apply enough external pressure, we can, shape human behavior to our will.
Yeah,
And sure, I mean, you can force compliance for a little while.
yeah.
You can make an employee cooperate until your back is turned. You can make a child obey through sheer intimidation, but you're essentially compressing a spring.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, the moment that external pressure is removed, the spring just snaps back. The compliance vanishes instantly.
Right, because the tension we're looking at today is that massive gulf between forcing someone to act and actually
Yeah.
making them want to act.
Exactly.
So today, for everyone listening, we are exploring a profound human craving. It's the craving to be important and appreciated. We're pulling this from a deep dive into the psychology of human relations, specifically looking at Chapter 2 of our core text, which breaks down the big secret of dealing with people.
And it really is a secret, even though it's hidden in plain sight.
Yeah, for anyone tuning in who is in business, navigating entrepreneurship, or frankly, just trying to survive daily human relationships, understanding this single psychological drive is the ultimate shortcut. It's the underlying mechanism for building unbreakable loyalty, turning around failing teams, and mastering the fine art of actual leadership.
It truly is the foundation of all genuine influence. Because if you fail to grasp the mechanics of this one concept, you're going to spend your entire life pushing against a locked door when you could just turn the handle. You have to move past the idea of coercion and understand what is actually happening inside the human mind when it interacts with another person.
Well, let's start right at the bedrock of human motivation then. Because to understand how to influence people, we have to look at what actually gets them out of bed every single day.
Right.
And if you look at foundational psychology, you run into some heavy hitters. Like Sigmund Freud, for instance, had a very specific distillation. He argued that everything you and I do springs from two base motives, the sex urge and the desire to be great.
Freud's perspective was, revolutionary for its time, but when you dig into the nuances of daily human interaction, another towering figure in philosophy and psychology offers a lens that is arguably much sharper for our purposes.
Okay, Zap.
John Dewey, the American philosopher, he phrased it slightly differently. He identified the deepest urge in human nature as the desire to be important.
The desire to be important.
Yeah, and we need to sit with that phrasing for a moment. He didn't say the desire to be wealthy or the desire to be comfortable. He specifically said the desire to be important.
Right. And then William James, who is, one of the foundational thinkers in psychology, comes along and sharpens the blade even further.
He does.
Because he didn't just call it a wish. He didn't call it a longing or like a preference.
Yeah.
James used a very deliberate, visceral word. He called it a craving. The craving to be appreciated.
That vocabulary shift is critical because when we think of a wish, we think of a fleeting thought. You wish it wouldn't rain today.
Sure.
You wish you had a nicer car. A wish is passive, but a craving is a biological imperative. I mean, think about the basic drives we all share.
Food, water, shelter.
Exactly. We want health and the preservation of life. We want food. We want sleep. We want money and the security it provides. We want the well-being of our families.
Yeah, and in our modern industrialized society, most of those fundamental wants are actually gratified pretty regularly.
Yeah.
If you're hungry, you can usually find food. If you're tired, you eventually sleep.
But this one specific longing, this craving to be important, this craving to be appreciated, is almost as deep and almost as imperious as the desire for food or sleep. But the tragedy is, it is almost never gratified.
Never.
People are walking around every single day with this gnawing, unfaltering hunger.
It really is a profound heart hunger, like a psychological famine. And the rare individual who figures out how to honestly satisfy this heart hunger will hold people in the palm of their hand.
Absolutely.
Our source material makes a rather poetic point about this.
Okay.
It says that when a person who truly knows how to appreciate others passes away, even the undertaker will be sorry.
I love that line.
Right. Why? Because they provided a psychological nutrient that is so unimaginably rare and so desperately needed by everyone they encountered.
A psychological nutrient, that's a great way to put it.
Well, think about it like this. If we deprive someone of food, they physically starve, and we can clearly see the deterioration. Their body withers.
Yeah, we'd never let that happen.
Exactly. We would never let someone we care about physically starve right in front of us.
Yeah.
But if we deprive them of appreciation, they psychologically starve. And because it's invisible, we don't realize we're the ones starving them.
Wow. Yeah.
We just look at them and wonder why they're lashing out, or why they're totally disengaged at work, or, why they're emotionally pulling away in a marriage. They are starving for importance, and their behavior is just a symptom of that malnutrition.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. And what makes this psychological hunger so fascinating is that it's the primary dividing line between humanity and the rest of the animal kingdom.
How so?
Because the cognitive architecture required to care about importance is uniquely human.
Oh, right. There's an incredible story in the text that perfectly illustrates this divide. It's a memory from the author's childhood on a Missouri farm.
Yeah, the hog.
Yes. His father bred these highly pedigreed Duroc Jersey hogs and white-faced cattle.
Oh.
And they would take these animals and exhibit them at country fairs and livestock shows all throughout the Middle West.
And they won. Right.
They won first prizes by the score. But the interesting part isn't the winning, it's what the father did with the prizes.
Yeah, he took all these blue ribbons and pinned them onto a long sheet of white muslin. And whenever friends or visitors stopped by the farm, he'd bring out this long sheet of muslin. He would hold one end, he'd make his son hold the other, and he'd proudly exhibit these blue ribbons to the guests.
Now, the punchline here is that the hogs didn't care about the ribbons.
Not at all.
The hogs had absolutely no concept of a blue ribbon or what it signified. They just wanted slop and a place to sleep. But the father cared deeply. Those prizes gave him a profound feeling of importance. He needed that validation from his peers.
And if you zoom out and look at the evolutionary and sociological implications of that story, it explains human history.
Really? Just from the ribbons?
Well, yeah. If our ancestors hadn't developed this flaming, irrational urge for a feeling of importance, civilization itself would have been impossible. We would never have built cities, formed complex hierarchies, or created art. We'd just be foraging and sleeping, much like the hogs.
That makes total sense. It is this exact same desire, this desperate craving for importance, that built the modern world.
You see it driving the most incredible underdog stories in Sindri, too.
Like who?
Well, this craving was the exact fuel that led an uneducated, poverty-stricken grocery clerk to start studying law books that he found at the bottom of a barrel of household junk he bought for 50 cents.
Wait, I know this one. That clerk was Abraham Lincoln.
Exactly. He didn't just want a job. He was driven by a need to be a person of significance.
And it's the exact same psychological engine that inspired Charles Dickens to write novels that defined an era. It drove Sir Christopher Wren to design his architectural masterpieces in stone. It's what made the Rockefellers amass millions of dollars they could never possibly spend in 10 lifetimes.
Right. And bringing it right back down to earth. It's the exact same craving that makes people want to wear the latest designer styles or, finance a car they can barely afford.
Oh, or constantly brag about their brilliant children on social media.
Exactly. It's all the same hunger.
Which means, as a practical takeaway for you listening, we have to become master observers of human hunger. Every interaction you have with a client, a partner, an employee, is an opportunity to either feed or starve this psychological need.
Yeah.
If you want to get someone to do something, you cannot start by demanding it. You have to pause and figure out, okay, how will this action, this behavior I want from them, make them feel important?
Which naturally leads us to observe how people hunt for this feeling. Because once you understand that everyone is starving for importance, you realize that the method they choose to get that feeling reveals the core of who they are.
Let's explore that, because the text argues that how a person gets their feeling of importance actually determines their character. It's a defining metric of an individual.
It absolutely is. I mean, if you tell me how you get your feeling of importance, I can tell you exactly what your character is, what your values are, and what your trajectory is likely to be.
Because the craving itself is neutral, right?
Yes. The craving is morally neutral. It's just an energy source, like electricity. The character is determined by what you plug into that energy source.
The historical contrast the text draws here is just mind-blowing. Let's look at the two extreme ends of the spectrum. On the one side, you have someone like John D. Rockefeller. How did Rockefeller get his feeling of importance?
He built a hospital.
Yeah, he found it by funding a massive modern hospital in Peking, China for millions of dollars. He did it to care for poor people he had never seen and would never, ever see.
He channeled that deep psychological craving into monumental philanthropy. He achieved his sense of immortality and significance by building something that healed people.
But remember, the underlying hunger was exactly the same as our next example.
Right, look at the other extreme, John Dillinger. How did Dillinger get his feeling of importance?
By robbing banks.
He got it by being a bank robber, a killer, and a fugitive. There's a chilling historical detail about Dillinger that perfectly captures this.
Oh, when he was on the run.
Yes. When he was actively being hunted by federal agents, he crashed into a farmhouse up in Minnesota to hide. But he didn't just cower in the corner. He stood up and proudly declared to the terrified farmer, "I'm Dillinger."
He was actually bragging.
He was proud of the fact that he was public enemy #1. He reportedly said, "I'm not going to hurt you, but I'm Dillinger."
It's incredible. The psychological fuel burning inside Rockefeller and Dillinger was identical. The gnawing hunger for importance. The only significant difference between the billionaire philanthropist and the bank-robbing killer was the vehicle they chose to satisfy that hunger.
Dillinger couldn't build a hospital in Peking, so he robbed banks to make the front page of the newspaper.
Wow. And history is absolutely littered with examples of the staggering ego displays this craving produces. When you look at the lengths powerful people go to just to ensure they feel important, it's almost comical.
Oh, it really is. Like George Washington, the father of the nation, literally wanted to be called His Mightiness, the President of the United States.
His mightiness. You've got to be kidding.
Nope. And Christopher Columbus pleaded endlessly with the Spanish crown for the title Admiral of the Ocean and Viceroy of India.
That's quite a mouthful. What about Catherine the Great of Russia?
She flat out refused to open any mail that wasn't explicitly addressed to Her Imperial Majesty. She would just send it back.
Just return to sender. That's hilarious. And it isn't just about titles, is it? It's about physical legacy, too.
Yeah. Wealthy millionaires helped finance Admiral Byrd's famous expedition to the Antarctic in 1928, but they didn't do it just for the sake of science.
Of course not.
They funded it with the strict, written understanding that ranges of undiscovered icy mountains would be named after them.
Naturally.
Victor Hugo, one of the greatest writers in history, seriously aspired to have the city of Paris renamed in his honor. Even Shakespeare tried to add artificial luster to his name by procuring a coat of arms for his family.
But the text goes even deeper than ego and legacy, which I found fascinating. It highlights how this craving can actually manifest physically. Some people will literally make themselves sick to get this feeling of importance.
Oh, the invalidism, yes. There's the bizarre case of Mrs. McKinley, the wife of the President of the United States.
This is a textbook example of using victimhood or fragility as a weapon for importance. Because Mrs. McKinley got her feeling of importance by forcing her husband, the leader of the free world, to neglect vital affairs of state.
Right. She would recline on her bed and demand that he lie beside her for hours at a time with his arm around her, soothing her to sleep. She used her invalidism to command total attention.
She actually insisted he remain with her while she was having her teeth fixed.
And didn't she create a massive scene once?
Oh, yeah. She created a massive stormy scene when he dared to leave her alone to attend an absolutely critical meeting with his cabinet.
It reveals the dark lengths to which the human psyche will go to avoid the terrifying feeling of insignificance. People will unconsciously, or sometimes consciously, adopt the role of an invalid just to win sympathy, extract attention, and secure that feeling of importance.
It's manipulative, but it's driven by that same hunger.
The text even notes that some people are so desperately hungry for a feeling of importance that they'll actually retreat into insanity to get it.
Wait, really?
Yeah, when the harsh reality of life denies them any avenue for significance, their brain literally fractures reality to create a dream world where they are finally important.
Quick, let me pause and really look at the implications of this. Because if people will literally go to the extremes of a life of violent crime like Dillinger, or feigned illness like Mrs. McKinley, or even sheer psychological breaks into insanity just to feel important,
Right.
aren't we sitting on an absolute goldmine if we could just figure out how to give them that feeling in a healthy, honest way?
You're sitting on the most powerful psychological lever in existence. I mean, think about the friction in your daily life. Before you judge a difficult client who's micromanaging you, or an erratic employee who's causing drama, or a stubborn partner who keeps picking fights.
Stop and ask yourself one diagnostic question.
Yes. How are they currently trying to feel important? What is their underlying strategy?
Because once you identify their method, you can redirect it. You can guide them toward a positive, productive path simply by providing the validation and the sense of importance they are so desperately trying to extract through negative behavior.
Exactly. Which brings us to the boardroom.
Yes. If feeding this hunger is so fundamental to human nature, what happens when it's deliberately weaponized for success? What happens when you apply this understanding at the absolute highest levels of industry?
It changes everything.
Let's look at the corporate application, what we might call the million-dollar secret, because we are talking about appreciation as the ultimate leadership tool.
When we observe the highest echelons of corporate success, there's a common misconception. We usually assume that titans of industry achieve their positions through unparalleled technical skill or sheer intellectual brilliance or, ruthless efficiency.
Right, the typical cutthroat CEO stereotype.
But the historical analysis reveals something completely counterintuitive. True earning power, the kind that builds empires, comes almost entirely from the ability to arouse enthusiasm among people.
And the mechanism for arousing that enthusiasm is appreciation and encouragement while ruthlessly eliminating the instinct to criticize.
Let's bring in a historical heavyweight to prove this, Charles Schwab.
Ah, yes.
Schwab was one of the very first people in American business history to be paid a salary of over $1 million a year. And context is everything here. This was back in 1921.
Yeah, there was no income tax back then. A person earning $50 a week was considered incredibly well off.
Right. And Andrew Carnegie hired Charles Schwab to be the first president of the newly formed United States Steel Company at just 38 years old, paying him $1 million a year.
To put that in perspective, that was more than $3,000 a day in 1921 currency. That is a staggering valuation of a human being's skill set.
It's mind-boggling, and the obvious question is why? Why did Andrew Carnegie, a man known for his shrewdness, pay him that absurd amount? Was Schwab an unparalleled engineering genius?
No.
Did he know more about the chemical manufacture of steel than anyone else?
Not at all. Schwab himself freely admitted that he had many men working under him who knew far more about the technical aspects of steel manufacturing than he ever would.
So what was his secret?
Schwab explicitly stated why he was paid that salary. He said it was largely because of his ability to deal with people. He shared his secret, and honestly, this should be etched into the wall of every office building in the world.
What did he say?
Schwab said, "I consider my ability to arouse enthusiasm among my people the greatest asset I possess, and the way to develop the best that is in a person is by appreciation and encouragement."
He was a pioneer of psychological safety before the term even existed.
Absolutely.
He went on to explain his exact methodology. He said, "There is nothing else that so kills the ambitions of a person as criticisms from superiors. I never criticize anyone. I believe in giving a person incentive to work. So I am anxious to praise, but loath to find fault."
And here's the core philosophy, the exact phrase he lived by. "If I like anything, I am hearty in my approbation and lavish in my praise."
Hearty in my approbation and lavish in my praise. Now contrast that with what the average manager does today.
Oh, it's the exact opposite. If an average boss doesn't like a thing, they bawl out their subordinates, they yell, they write them up, they criticize. But if the employee does a great job, if they hit the target, the manager says absolutely nothing because, well, that's what they're paid to do.
It's like that old couplet the text references. "Once I did bad, and that I heard ever. Twice I did good, but that I heard never."
It's a devastatingly flawed approach to human capital.
It is. Schwab declared that in all his wide association in life, meeting with great people all over the world, he had yet to find the person, no matter how exalted their station, who did not do better work and put forth greater effort under a spirit of approval than they would ever do under a spirit of criticism.
Because criticism triggers the brain's defense mechanisms,
Right.
while approval triggers the brain's reward centers.
Exactly. And this wasn't just Schwab's personal quirk. It was the outstanding reason for the phenomenal success of Andrew Carnegie himself.
Carnegie didn't just praise his associates publicly and privately. He internalized his philosophy so deeply that he wanted to praise his assistants from beyond the grave.
Right. His tombstone.
He actually wrote an epitaph for his own tombstone that read, "Here lies one who knew how to get around him, men who were cleverer than himself."
It requires an incredibly secure ego to admit that your success is entirely dependent on the brilliance of the people you uplifted.
Yeah, that takes real confidence.
Sincere appreciation was also one of the great secrets of John D. Rockefeller. There's a story in our material about one of his partners, Edward T. Bedford, that perfectly illustrates how to handle failure through this lens.
Oh, the South America deal.
Yeah. Bedford made a bad buy in South America and lost $1 million for the firm. $1 million of Rockefeller's money gone.
Okay, wait. Let's really look at this because this is where theory hits reality. Bedford blew $1 million.
Yep.
If you're Rockefeller, a notorious titan of industry, how do you not fire him on the spot? How do you manage a catastrophic loss like that without rewarding incompetence or setting a terrible precedent for the rest of the company?
It's a brilliant question, and the answer requires an incredible level of emotional intelligence and executive restraint. Look at the reality of the situation. Rockefeller knew Bedford had done his best. The investment went south, the money was gone, and the incident was closed.
So yelling wouldn't help.
Exactly. Berating him, screaming at him, or firing him wouldn't magically bring the $1 million back. It would only destroy Bedford's confidence and terrify the rest of the executive team into never taking a calculated risk again.
So what did he actually do? Because doing nothing feels weak.
He didn't do nothing. Instead of criticizing, Rockefeller actively searched the wreckage of the deal for something to praise.
Praise in $1 million loss.
Yes. He found out that Bedford, realizing the deal was collapsing, had scrambled and managed to salvage a portion of the original investment. So Rockefeller sat him down and congratulated Bedford because he had been able to save 60% of the money he had invested.
Wow.
Rockefeller looked at him and said, "That's splendid. We don't always do as well as that upstairs."
That is just masterful leadership. He completely flipped the narrative. He closed the door on the Ross, but he highlighted the effort of the salvage.
Deliberately maintaining Bedford's psychological safety.
By doing that, he ensured Bedford would remain a loyal, highly motivated executive who wasn't paralyzed by the fear of failure.
Exactly. If we connect this to the broader picture of modern leadership, the practical takeaway is stark. Stop focusing your energy on catching your people doing things wrong.
Yes, it's a toxic, outdated management style that only produces anxious employees who do the bare minimum to avoid getting yelled at.
You have to actively, deliberately hunt for reasons to praise your team. You want to cultivate an ecosystem where people perform out of a spirit of approval, a desire to excel because they know their excellence will be recognized and celebrated.
It's clear that appreciation is literally $1 million corporate skill, but it forces a very uncomfortable pivot for a lot of us.
Oh, there we go.
Because if business leaders and entrepreneurs understand that this is the secret to building empires, why do we abandon this skill the second we pull into our driveways?
Yes.
That is the profound irony we're looking at next. The danger of taking people for granted.
It is the great tragedy of human relations. We nod our heads at Charles Schwab and Rockefeller. We agree that appreciation is powerful, but then we go home and completely neglect to nourish the self-esteem of our spouses, our children, our friends, and the everyday people we interact with.
It's so true.
We treat the people closest to us with a level of emotional stinginess that we would never dream of using on a high-value client. We take their constant daily contributions as a given. We assume they know we love and appreciate them, so we just stop saying it.
The text highlights this with a story that's framed humorously, but if you look closely, it's actually deeply poignant. It captures the pain of systemic invisibility.
The farm woman.
Yeah. There was a farm woman who had been cooking heavy, laborious meals for her menfolks for 20 years. And one night, at the end of a long, exhausting day's work, they sat down at the table, and she set before them a heaping pile of hay.
And predictably, they were outraged. They indignantly demanded to know if she had lost her mind.
Right. And her reply is devastating. She said, "Why? How did I know you'd notice? I've been cooking for you men for the last 20 years, and in all that time, I ain't heard no word to let me know you wasn't just eating hay."
It's a folksy exaggeration, but it points to a massive sociological truth, especially regarding domestic labor and familial roles.
Oh, absolutely.
When sociologists and therapists study why spouses run away or why marriages slowly decay into resentment, one of the primary overwhelming reasons discovered is lack of appreciation. We take our partners so much for granted that we never let them know we actually see the effort they're putting in. We stop feeding their craving for importance.
There's a counter story in the text about a husband who actually recognized this trap and navigated it brilliantly. His wife had gone to a self-improvement program, and as part of her homework, she asked her husband to list 6 things he would like her to change about herself to help her become a better wife.
Talk about a precarious situation. That is a psychological landmine.
That's a total trap.
If he lists 6 things, he's validating her insecurities. If he lists nothing, he seems disengaged.
Exactly. But this man handled it with incredible grace. He told her he needed to think about it. The next morning, instead of handing her a list of critiques, He called the local florist and had 6 red roses sent to her with a note.
So smart.
The note simply read, "I can't think of 6 things I would like to change about you. I love you the way you are."
It's a masterstroke of emotional intelligence.
When he got home that evening, his wife was waiting at the door, almost in tears. She was deeply, profoundly moved. He realized right then that if he'd given her a list of flaws, he would have starved her. By giving her unconditional validation, he fed her craving for importance in a way she would remember forever.
And this principle extends far beyond marriages. Think about how we raise children. We are obsessed with providing them with physical nourishment, the right foods, vitamins, sleep schedules, but how seldom do we provide them with deliberate psychological nourishment?
We give them calories to build their bodies, but we neglect to give them the specific kind words of appreciation that would build their internal self-concept and sing in their memories for decades.
Speaking of memories that last decades, there is an anecdote in this material that gives me chills every time I read it.
The classroom story.
Yes. It's about the power of noticing someone's unique gift, especially when society has labeled them as broken. Years ago, in a classroom in Detroit, a teacher asked a young, blind student named Stevie to help her find a mouse that was lost in the room.
The specifics of that request are everything.
They really are. She didn't ask the sighted kids to find the mouse. She intentionally asked the blind student why. Because she appreciated the fact that nature had given this boy something no one else in the room had. She publicly recognized and validated his remarkable, extraordinarily sensitive pair of ears.
And the text notes the profound impact of this, because this was the very first time this young boy had ever been shown appreciation for those talented ears. Up until that point, his blindness was just a deficit. But this teacher reframed it.
And that young boy was Stevie Morris. The world knows him today as Stevie Wonder.
It's incredible how one moment of validation changes a life.
And years later, Stevie Wonder reflected that this single act of appreciation, this validation of his unique sensory capability, was the catalyst for a new life. From that moment on, he consciously developed his gift of hearing and became one of the greatest musical legends in human history.
All because one teacher decided not to view his disability as his defining trait, but to actively appreciate his unique capability. She fed his craving for importance, and it altered the trajectory of music history.
You see this exact same power to transform people through appreciation in the entertainment world, too. Think about Florin Ziegfeld, the legendary Broadway producer who created the Ziegfeld Follies.
Okay.
He built his entire reputation on his ability to glorify the American girl.
Ziegfeld's method is a perfect case study in the Pygmalion effect, right? Yeah. The psychological phenomenon where higher expectations lead to an increase in performance.
Yes, exactly. He didn't just go out and hire pre-existing confident stars. Time after time, he took what the text describes as drab little creatures, women who lacked confidence, who no one ever looked at twice, and he transformed them on the stage into glamorous, radiant visions.
But how do you even do that? I mean, it's not just makeup and lighting.
No, it was entirely through the sheer power of gallantry and consideration. Ziegfeld understood the value of appreciation and confidence. He made these women feel beautiful before they ever stepped on stage.
So he changed their self-concept.
Precisely. He raised their salaries to show financial appreciation. He sent personal telegrams to the stars on opening night. He deluged every single chorus girl in the show with American Beauty roses. He relentlessly fed their craving for importance, and as a result, they blossomed. They became the glamorous stars he treated them as.
Okay, I am completely sold on the power of this. It can create a Stevie Wonder, it can create Broadway stars, it can save marriages. But it raises a huge practical question for me. If appreciation is this magical, this transformative, why is it so incredibly hard for us to do? Why do we default to the negative? Why is it so much easier to criticize a coworker or snap at a spouse than it is to praise them?
Because, neurologically speaking, criticism is a lazy reflex.
A lazy reflex.
Yeah, it takes almost zero cognitive effort to spot a flaw. Our brains are hardwired for threat detection. A mistake, a flaw, or a failure interrupts our expected pattern, so it instantly jumps out at us and demands attention.
Oh, that makes sense.
But appreciation requires active, conscious observation. It requires empathy. It requires you to intentionally step out of your own internal monologue, quiet your ego, and genuinely pay attention to the value someone else is providing. It requires deliberate intention.
Which means the takeaway for you listening right now is to conduct a radical audit of your daily interactions. We have to stop sleepwalking through our relationships.
Yeah.
When you enjoy a great meal at a restaurant, Don't just pay the bill, and send word to the kitchen that the chef prepared it excellently. When a tired salesperson at the end of a long shift shows you unusual courtesy, look them in the eye and specifically mention it.
Leave a friendly trail of little sparks of gratitude on your daily trips. Recognize the unique talents of those around you, just like Stevie Wonder's teacher did.
It is the legal tender that all souls enjoy, and you'll be surprised how these little sparks of gratitude set small flames of friendship and loyalty that will be beacons for you in the future. It costs you nothing, but to the recipient, it is priceless.
I agree completely, but I feel like we have to raise a massive red flag here.
Uh-oh, what's the red flag?
Because I know exactly what some people are thinking right now. Okay, so I just start throwing praise at everyone I meet. I just walk around buttering people up all day, telling my boss how smart he is and telling my clients how great they are.
Right. Intelligent people will spot that manipulation from a mile away.
And they would be absolutely right to spot it, and they would be right to reject it with contempt. Which brings us to the crucial pivot in this entire philosophy. We have to draw a profound, unmistakable distinction between appreciation and flattery. This is the sincerity requirement.
This is where we separate the manipulative sociopaths from the true empathetic leaders. What is the fundamental difference between the two?
The difference is simple in concept, but profound in execution. Flattery is shallow. It is inherently selfish. It's counterfeit. It comes, as the text beautifully puts it, from the teeth out.
From the teeth out.
Wow. Yes. Appreciation, on the other hand, is sincere. It is unselfish. It comes from the heart out. Flattery is universally condemned because it is a trick. Appreciation is universally admired because it is a gift.
Flattery's cheap. The material mentions General Alvaro Obregón, a Mexican hero who had these incredibly wise words carved below his bust. Don't be afraid of enemies who attack you. Be afraid of the friends who flatter you.
That is so true.
King George V had a set of maxims hanging on the wall of his study at Buckingham Palace, too. And one of the most prominent was, teach me neither to proffer nor receive cheap praise. Cheap praise is all flattery is.
I think the most piercing definition of flattery provided in our reading is this. Flattery is telling the other person precisely what he thinks about himself.
Wait, say that again?
Flattery is telling the other person precisely what he thinks about himself. It requires no observation of their actual value. You are just taking their own inflated ego and echoing it back to them for your own transactional gain.
Like an echo chamber.
Exactly. It's counterfeit psychological money, and just like passing fake bills, eventually it will get you into serious trouble when people realize they've been conned.
Let's look at a real-world example of navigating this correctly. There's a story about a woman named Pamela Dunham. She was a supervisor whose duties included managing a janitor who was doing a genuinely abysmal job.
Oh, this is a great case study.
And the situation was spiraling. The other employees were mocking him, and they even started deliberately littering the hallways just to show him what a bad job he was doing. It was a completely toxic environment, and massive amounts of productive time were being lost to this drama.
Now, let's analyze Pamela's options. She could have fired him, but maybe she was short-staffed. She could have screamed at him, which might have produced temporary compliance, but would have fueled his resentment.
Or she could have tried cheap flattery to butter him up, walking over and saying, "You're the best janitor we've ever had."
But he wasn't stupid. He knew he was doing a bad job. If she flattered him, he would have known she was lying, and he would have lost whatever tiny ounce of respect he had for her.
Right. But she didn't do any of those things. She had tried various normal ways to motivate him without success. But then she started actively observing, and she noticed that occasionally, very rarely, he did a particularly good piece of work on a specific task.
So she waited.
She waited. She didn't invent praise. She waited for reality to provide an opportunity. And when he did that genuinely good piece of work, she made a point to praise him for it. And she did it publicly, in front of the other people who had been mocking him.
The behavioral mechanics of what she did are brilliant. She observed patiently, she waited for a truthful, objective moment, and then she gave sincere public appreciation based on undeniable reality. It wasn't flattery. It was targeted positive reinforcement.
And what was the psychological result?
It broke the cycle. Each day, the job he did all around got slightly better. Pretty soon, he started doing all his work efficiently. He completely transformed into an excellent worker. And eventually, the other people in the building started giving him appreciation and recognition naturally.
Honest, sincere appreciation got massive results, where criticism, ridicule, and surely counterfeit flattery would have absolutely failed.
But we have to emphasize the mental shift required to execute this. You cannot just invent things to appreciate. You can't fake it. You actually have to do the hard work of finding the hidden value in the person in front of you.
Look, let me play devil's advocate for a second here,
Okay, Amir.
because this is where people get stuck. What if I am looking at someone, a deeply difficult coworker, a stubborn family member, a toxic boss, and I honestly, truly, looking at them objectively, cannot find a single positive thing to appreciate about them? What do I do then?
When you hit that wall, the problem isn't the other person. The problem is your lens. You need to radically change your perspective.
How so?
To answer this, the text relies on the philosophy of Ralph Waldo Emerson. Emerson said, "Every man I meet is my superior in some way. In that, I learn of him."
Wow.
Think about the sheer humility of that statement. If Emerson, who is arguably one of the greatest, most towering intellects of his century, believed that every single person he met was superior to him in some specific way, isn't it likely to be 1,000 times more true for you and me?
That is incredibly humbling. It forces you to drop your own arrogance.
It does. And the practical takeaway here is that we have to stop spending 95% of our mental energy thinking about ourselves. If we can just step outside of our own ego, our own wants, and our own complaints for 5 minutes, we won't ever need to resort to cheap flattery.
Because we'll see the truth.
Right. If you genuinely look at the other person with the assumption that they are your superior in some hidden way, you will naturally spot the genuine strengths and virtues that deserve hearty approbation and lavish praise.
Let's pull all of these threads together, because we have covered a massive amount of psychological ground today.
We really have.
We started by dismantling the illusion of coercive force and realized that everyone you meet is starving for a feeling of importance. We saw how the vehicle they choose in pursuit of that feeling defines their entire character, from the philanthropy of Rockefeller to the criminality of Dillinger.
Yeah, that contrast is wild.
We unpacked the million-dollar corporate secret of Charles Schwab, proving that sincere appreciation is the ultimate executive leadership tool. We confronted the everyday tragedy of taking the people closest to us for granted. And finally, we drew the hard, uncompromising line between the manipulative poison of cheap flattery and the transformative power of sincere appreciation.
If you distill everything we've discussed into one clear, memorable insight, the absolute soul of this chapter, it is this. Genuine appreciation is not a business tactic.
Right.
It's not a clever trick you keep in your back pocket to close a tough sale or a script you read to get your kids to clean their room. It is a fundamental structural shift in how you view humanity.
It's the conscious recognition that every single person you lock eyes with today, the barista, your boss, your spouse, the difficult client, is walking around carrying a gnawing, desperate hunger to be valued.
Exactly. And by acknowledging that invisible hunger and by making the active choice to sincerely recognize their inherent value, because as Emerson noted, everyone is your superior in some way, you hold the key.
You really do.
You have the power to transform erratic behavior, to build thriving, fiercely loyal businesses, and to profoundly change the trajectory of people's lives. You become the rare individual who feeds the starving, psychologically speaking.
It changes everything about how you navigate the world. But it leaves us with a fascinating puzzle as we wrap up this topic.
What's that?
Well, now that you understand how to feed someone's deepest, most primal hunger for importance, how do you use that psychological understanding to make them actively want to buy your product, adopt your radical idea, or enthusiastically follow your lead?
The million-dollar question.
We'll leave you to ponder how you can ethically align their deepest cravings with your own goals. Until next time, keep diving deep. Why do you keep baiting your fishing hook with strawberries and cream when the fish so clearly want worms?
Right. It's a great question.
I mean, I really want you to think about that for a second. If you're listening to this deep dive right now, maybe you're driving to work or making your morning coffee. It probably sounds like a completely ridiculous, almost insulting question.
No, absolutely.
But if you strip away the metaphor
Yeah.
and you look at how we actually navigate our daily lives,
Yeah.
how we negotiate, how we manage our teams or, interact with our partners, this is exactly what almost all of us are doing.
Yeah, it really is. We spend our entire lives aggressively offering people what we want.
Yes.
And then, without fail, we act completely shocked-like, genuinely offended, when they don't bite.
It's the ultimate absurdity of human communication, isn't it?
It is. I mean, we operate under this immense cognitive blind spot where we just constantly project our own internal desires onto everyone else. We walk into high-stakes negotiations or complex arguments with our spouses. We step into a meeting with our department heads, and we just lay out this giant, beautiful platter of our own favorite strawberries and cream.
Like, here's exactly what I need from you.
Exactly. We tell them what we need, and then we genuinely cannot fathom why the other person is looking at us like we've completely lost our minds.
That perfectly frames what we're unpacking today. So for this deep dive, we are examining what is arguably the psychological holy grail of business, leadership, and just interpersonal dynamics in general.
The Holy Grail. I like that.
It really is. We're going to deconstruct the actual mechanics of how to get anyone to do what you want, specifically by making them want to do it.
Which is the hardest part.
Right. For any entrepreneur, any manager, or really anyone who just interacts with other human beings and wants to reduce the friction in their life. Mastering this single underlying principle is the difference between, exhausting yourself, pushing a massive boulder up a steep hill, and effortlessly watching that same boulder just roll down on its own.
Because it requires a fundamental paradigm shift, in how we process human interaction.
Yeah, totally.
We're drawing the core material today from Dale Carnegie's work, specifically focusing on Chapter 3, which revolves around this profoundly bold statement. He says, "He who can do this has the whole world with him. He who cannot walks a lonely way."
It's a massive promise.
It's huge. But when we look at the cognitive science and the historical evidence backing it up, the reality of that statement becomes pretty much undeniable.
So let's start by unpacking that fishing hook analogy, because I think it's the perfect anchor for this entire philosophy. The author recounts how he used to go fishing up in Maine during the summer.
Right.
And personally, he absolutely loved strawberries and cream. To him, that was like the ultimate treat.
Sounds pretty good, yeah.
But he noticed a very strange, yet entirely obvious phenomenon when he sat by the water. The fish, they didn't care about his dietary preferences. The fish preferred worms.
A truly shopping revelation for the human ego.
Right. But the brilliance is in the application.
Yeah.
When he went fishing, he didn't think about what he wanted. He completely suspended his own desires.
He didn't dangle a hook loaded with a fresh strawberry in front of a trout and say, "Hey, wouldn't you love this?"
This is my favorite.
Exactly. He dangled a worm or a grasshopper. I mean, you do not bait a hook with your favorite dessert. You bait it to suit the fish.
It's the most basic law of nature. Yet somehow, the exact moment we stop dealing with fish and we start dealing with human beings, we just completely jettison this basic law. We revert right back to dangling strawberries.
We absolutely do. And the fundamental, the uncompromising rule of influence that we have to accept, and it is a tough pill to swallow, is that nobody cares about what you want.
Ouch.
It sounds harsh, almost cynical, but it is the absolute baseline of human psychology. You are eternally, obsessively interested in what you want.
Sure.
And every single other person walking the earth is eternally, obsessively interested only in what they want.
So true.
If you look at historical figures who managed to maintain unprecedented, really long-lasting influence, they intuitively understood this cognitive reality. Take David Lloyd George, for instance.
UK Prime Minister during the First World War.
Exactly. Now, consider the historical context here. When you look at the other major wartime leaders, Woodrow Wilson in the United States, Vittorio Orlando of Italy, Georges Clemenceau of France.
Right, the big players.
They all essentially fell from power or were deeply marginalized in the complex, really brutal aftermath of the war. Their legacies at the peace tables were fraught with failure.
Because they were constantly pushing their own geopolitical strawberries and cream.
Precisely. But Lloyd George managed to stay on top. He survived the political meat grinder. And when he was later asked how he managed to survive politically when all his formidable contemporaries fell by the wayside, his answer was just brilliant in its absolute simplicity.
What did he say?
He said if his staying on top might be attributed to any one single thing, it would be to his having learned early on that it is necessary to, quote, bait the hook to suit the fish.
Wow. Now, I want to stop and examine this.
Ooh.
Because I imagine you, listening right now, might be having the exact same reaction I did initially.
Which is?
It sounds almost too simple. Bait the hook to suit the fish. Find out what people want. Frame your request around that, and you win.
Great.
If it's such a basic rule of common sense, if it's so incredibly obvious, Why do 90% of people completely ignore it 90% of the time? I mean, why is our default human setting so fundamentally broken?
Well, that is the essential question, isn't it? To understand the failure rate, we really have to deeply analyze the human ego and this concept of cognitive load.
Okay, break that down for us.
Think about it. From the exact moment you wake up in the morning to the moment you drift off to sleep, your internal monologue is entirely relentlessly centered on your own needs, your own fears, your own immediate ambitions.
Yeah, I'm the main character.
Exactly. You are the absolute center of your own universe. We are so blinded by the intense urgency of our own desires that we instinctively project them outward. In a psychological sense, we actually operate quite similarly to toddlers.
Oh, wow. Toddlers.
Yeah, a toddler genuinely believes that because they are hungry, the whole world must logically be hungry. As adults, we don't really outgrow this. We just dress that toddler logic up in, tailored business suits and corporate jargon.
So we walk into a boardroom thinking, I absolutely need to close this sale today to meet my quarterly quota.
Yes.
Or we walk into our living room thinking, I need my partner to stop doing this annoying thing so my evening is quieter. We're just entirely trapped inside our own narrative.
Precisely. And stepping outside of that internal narrative requires a massive conscious expenditure of cognitive energy. Empathy, like real tactical empathy, is exhausting.
It takes actual work.
It does. It requires us to actively suppress our own screaming ego to make quiet room for someone else's perspective. It is entirely unnatural.
Because our brains are wired for self-preservation.
Exactly. Immediate self-preservation and self-interest. So when we default to telling people what we want, we aren't being malicious. We're just being cognitively lazy. We are taking the path of least neurological resistance.
Which means the practical takeaway for you, right now, listening to this, is incredibly actionable before you open your mouth in your next high-stakes negotiation.
Whether that's pitching a $1 million contract or asking for a promotion.
Right. Or honestly, just trying to convince your friends where to go for dinner, you have to pause. You have to forcefully, consciously remove your own desires from the equation. Put your strawberries and cream back in the fridge and dedicate your mental energy entirely to identifying the worm that the other party is actively swimming around looking for.
I love that. And taking that a step further, it leads us to a much deeper psychological reality. It is not just about finding out what people want in a superficial transactional sense.
Okay.
It's understanding a core driver of human behavior,
Oh, yeah.
which is that every single act a human performs is because they want something. Action springs only from fundamental desire.
Wait, every single act?
Every single one, even the actions we take that appear on the surface to be entirely selfless or self-sacrificing, they are ultimately rooted in a specific, internalized kind of desire.
Okay, I am going to play devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
Because this is usually where the theory hits a wall of skepticism. What about pure altruism?
Okay, let's hear
What
it.
about charity? Let's talk about someone giving a massive anonymous contribution to the Red Cross. Or, a soldier throwing themselves into harm's way for their unit. Are we really saying that is driven by a selfish desire? That feels deeply cynical, like reducing a hero to someone who just wanted something.
It's a phenomenal counter-argument, and it's exactly what we need to deconstruct to fully grasp this concept. Let's look at the Red Cross donation.
Right.
Why do you give away your hard-earned money to people you will never, ever meet? It's not cynical to say it's driven by desire. It's just biologically and psychologically accurate. You give that donation because you intensely want to lend a helping hand. You want to perform a beautiful, unselfish, divine act. You crave that specific internal gratification. The psychological reality of that exact moment is that the desire to perform that noble act, the deep desire for the profound feeling of being a good, generous, connected human being, suddenly outweighs your desire to keep the physical cash in your bank account.
Ah, I see. So it is really a prioritization of desires.
Exactly. If you hadn't wanted that specific feeling of moral elevation more than you wanted your money, you simply wouldn't have made the contribution.
Right.
Even in our absolute highest, most transcendent moral moments, the mechanism driving the action is still an internal want. It's a sort of positive sum egoism. We're driven to act because the internal reward of the action fulfills a deeply held desire about our own identity.
That completely shifts the perspective.
Yeah.
It's not that altruism doesn't exist. It's that the desire to be altruistic, the desire to align with our highest self is the actual engine driving the car.
Beautifully put.
So if we pull this out of the realm of high philosophy and apply it to everyday influence, the goal is never to forcefully implant your will into someone else. The goal is to act like a detective, find their existing humming engine of desire, and simply attach your objective to it.
Yes.
The source material has a brilliant example of this concerning a teenage boy who's smoking cigarettes.
Oh, yes. This perfectly illustrates the shift from pushing your desires to leveraging theirs. So you have parents who are worried sick about their teenage son's health because he has started smoking. And what is the default parental response? It's preaching. It is pure, unadulterated projection of their own wants. They sit him down and say, we want you to be healthy. We don't want you to get lung cancer. We want you to live a long life.
Which, to a teenager, is essentially white noise.
Complete static.
A teenager does not care about what their parents want. And beyond that, the teenage brain is notoriously bad at conceptualizing long-term consequences.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, a teenager barely comprehends their own mortality, let alone chronic illness 30 years in the future. So, threatening them with health warnings is the ultimate strawberry and cream approach. It is what the adult cares about, not the kid.
Precisely. The parents are offering a future-focused, risk-averse argument to a brain that is entirely present-focused and risk-seeking.
It's a total mismatch.
To actually influence that teenager, you have to stop talking about your fears and find out what he currently viscerally wants. Let's say this kid's entire world revolves around wanting to make the varsity basketball team or wanting to win the 100-yard dash at the upcoming track meet.
That is his burning desire.
Right. So you completely drop the cancer talk.
You tie the act of quitting smoking directly to his immediate goal.
Exactly. You show him, logically and clearly, how the nicotine and the tar are actively draining his stamina. You show him how every single cigarette is basically building a brick wall between him and the one thing he desperately wants, making that team.
You aren't forcing him to quit to please you. You are handing him the key to unlock his own ambition.
You're repositioning yourself from being an obstacle and authority figure telling him no to being a facilitator helping him get to yes.
Yeah.
It entirely removes the friction.
That principle is so incredibly potent. And it brings up one of my absolute favorite analogies from the text, the story of Ralph Waldo Emerson and the calf.
Oh, this is a great one.
This is a scene that just plays out perfectly in the mind's eye. So you have Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of the greatest American philosophers and essayists, and his son. And they are trying to get a stubborn calf into a barn.
Right.
And they are making the classic foundational mistake we have been discussing. They are thinking exclusively about what they want.
They want the calf in the barn. That is the absolute limit of their strategic thinking.
Right. So they resort to what we all resort to when we are blinded by our own goals. Pure brute force. Emerson is behind the calf, physically shoving it with all his might, sweating and straining.
And his son is in front.
Yes, his son's in front of the calf, pulling desperately on a halter. You have two brilliant intellectuals trying to muscle a terrified, stubborn animal.
And, of course, what is the calf doing? It is doing the exact same thing they are doing. The calf is thinking only of what it wants.
Which is to not go in the barn.
Exactly. It wants to stay right where it is. So it stiffens its legs, digs its hooves into the pasture, and creates an equal and opposite force of sheer stubbornness.
Now, enter the Irish housemaid.
Yes.
She sees this whole ridiculous tableau unfolding. Now, she doesn't write brilliant essays on transcendentalism. She doesn't give lectures at Harvard. But she possesses something far more practically valuable in that exact moment.
Fundamental cognitive empathy.
She actually stops and thinks about what the calf wants. She walks over, completely ignores the pushing and the pulling, puts her maternal finger gently into the calf's mouth, and lets the calf instinctively suck her finger as she calmly and effortlessly leads it right into the barn.
It is arguably the most perfect metaphor for human relations ever recorded.
It really is. I mean, think about it in the context of your own life.
Yeah.
Trying to force someone to adopt your viewpoint through arguing, scolding, or demanding is exactly like the Emerson method. You are just brute forcing a jammed door with your shoulder. You are bruising yourself, you are exhausting yourself, and the door remains stubbornly shut. The housemaid simply walks up, finds the right mechanism, and turns the key.
The physics of that metaphor are vital to understand. Brute force inevitably creates resistance. When you push a human being, their immediate psychological reflex is to push back, just to protect their autonomy.
Of course.
Alignment, on the other hand, creates momentum. There's a quote referenced in the sources from Harry A. Overstreet's seminal book, Influencing Human Behavior, that captures the mechanics of this perfectly. He writes, "First, arouse in the other person an eager want. He who can do this has the whole world with him. He who cannot walks a lonely way."
That's the title of the chapter.
It is. And I want to really dwell on the specific verb he chooses there, Arouse.
Yes, let's unpack the semantics of that because it is doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Notice very carefully what Overstreet does not say. He does not say implant an eager want. He doesn't say force or inject or manufacture an eager want.
You can't.
Exactly. You cannot artificially create a core desire in another human being that doesn't fundamentally exist. To arouse means to awaken something that is already there. But perhaps it's sleeping or dormant?
I see.
You're tapping into a pre-existing neurological current of motivation. You are not tasked with digging the trench and filling the river with water. Your only job is to find where the river of their desire is already flowing and simply drop your boat into its current.
So if you are listening to this and wondering how to apply it, the practical takeaway here is all about strategic mapping.
Yes.
If you want action from a colleague, a client, or a friend, you must first map your request to their core identity or their immediate pressing goals. You have to find that existing current.
Which logically brings us to what I consider the ultimate, most brutal proving ground for this entire theory.
Oh boy.
It is one thing to apply this to rational adults in a business setting. It is entirely another to apply it to the most purely emotional, profoundly stubborn, fiercely autonomous subjects in our daily lives.
You are talking about children.
I am absolutely talking about children. When you're dealing with a toddler or a young child, logic is entirely absent from the battlefield. You cannot reason with a 3-year-old.
You really can't.
And utilizing pure authority, the whole because I said so method, almost always backfires into a miserable, exhausting power struggle. With children, you have no choice. You must arouse an eager want or you will fail.
And the sources provide some incredible case studies on this. Let's look at what we can call Tim's Kindergarten Rebellion.
Oh, poor Tim.
This is a documented story from a man named Stan Novak from Cleveland. He comes home from a long day at work one evening and finds his house in absolute chaos. His youngest son, Tim, is kicking, screaming, and rolling around on the living room floor in a full-blown meltdown.
A nightmare scenario.
Right. And Tim is supposed to start his very first day of kindergarten the next morning. But he has drawn an absolute line in the sand. He's absolutely unequivocally not going.
He's not doing.
Now, let's be real. The host of options running through a stressed parent's head in that exact moment usually involves a mix of scolding, maybe banishing the kid to his room, and delivering an ultimatum. You're going to school tomorrow, and that is final.
Which is, once again, the parent defaulting to their own internal narrative.
Right.
They're focusing entirely on what the parent desperately needs, which is compliance, peace and quiet, and a smooth, tear-free morning the next day. They are shoving the cash.
Exactly. But Stan Novak manages to override that default setting. He takes a breath. He stops and asks himself the million-dollar question. If I were Tim, if I were a frightened 5-year-old boy, why on earth would I be genuinely excited about going to kindergarten?
A great reframe.
So he and his wife change tactics completely. They sit down and make a list of all the genuinely fun, exciting things Tim would get to do at school. Finger painting, singing songs, playing with new toys, making new friends.
But, and this is the critical step, they don't just walk over and read this logical list to a screaming child. That would be useless.
Completely useless. They have to demonstrate the value, they have to paint a picture, they have to bait the hook visually and emotionally.
Right. So they put the list into action. Stan, his wife, and their older son sit down at the kitchen table, pull out some paper and paints, and they just start finger painting.
Just having a great time.
And they make sure they're having a conspicuously amazing time. They are laughing, mixing colors, completely ignoring the tantrum in the living room.
They're generating serious FOMO, fear of missing out.
Instantly. Suddenly the screaming stops. Tim is peeping around the corner. He sees this incredibly fun activity happening without him, so he slowly walks over and, predictably, begs to join in.
And what does Stan say? He doesn't say, sure, come paint. He says, oh no, you can't do this. You have to go to kindergarten first to learn how to finger paint.
It is pure psychological genius. He completely reverses the polarity of the situation. School is no longer a prison sentence being imposed on the child. It is an exclusive club that the child must earn entry into.
It's brilliant. Stan then goes through the whole list, talking with maximum infectious enthusiasm about all the incredible fun waiting at kindergarten. He arouses the eager want.
And the result of this cognitive shift.
The next morning, Stan wakes up, goes downstairs, and finds Tim sitting perfectly still in the living room chair, fully dressed, fast asleep.
Wow.
When Stan gently wakes him up and asks what he's doing down there so early, Tim says, I'm waiting to go to kindergarten. I don't want to be late. By shifting his focus from his own desire for compliance to the child's desire for play and inclusion, the parents created an eager want that no amount of threatening, yelling, or bribing could have ever accomplished.
The contrast in outcomes is simply staggering. I mean, a night of screaming hostility versus a child literally sitting by the door waiting to leave. And the text provides other vivid illustrations that map exactly to this framework. Consider the story of the underweight boy and the neighborhood bully.
Oh, this one's is a masterclass in understanding what someone truly values.
It really is. You have a set of parents with a 3-year-old boy who adamantly refuses to eat properly. He's severely underweight, and the parents are terrified. So what do?
They use the default method.
The standard default method.
Yeah.
Incessant nagging and scolding. They sit him at the table and say, "Mother wants you to eat your vegetables. Father wants you to grow up to be a big, strong man."
But let's analyze that from the 3-year-old's perspective. A toddler has absolutely no conceptual framework for what it means to grow up to be a big man 30 years in the future.
Not at all.
The father's adult perspective on long-term physiological development is entirely meaningless to a child. It's literally sand on a beach to him.
Exactly. The parents are projecting their mature, long-term anxieties onto a creature that lives entirely in the immediate present. So after weeks of failure, they finally stop and ask themselves the golden question. What does this boy actually viscerally want right now?
And what did he want?
Well, it turned out there was a neighborhood bully, a slightly older kid who kept knocking this little boy off his tricycle and taking it. That was the boy's entire universe. That was his immediate, burning, daily crisis. So the parents completely changed their framing. They tied the solution to his desire. They explained very clearly that if he ate the specific food his mother prepared, he would rapidly get big enough and strong enough to walk outside and thoroughly whip that bully.
Wow. They tapped into a primal desire for dominance and self-preservation.
And the eating problem vanished overnight. Once his fundamental desire, revenge on the bully, or at the very least the ability to defend his own property, was directly tied to the act of eating his vegetables, he started eating everything in sight.
He would have eaten spinach, broccoli, or shoe leather if you told him it would help him beat up that bully.
Exactly. And there is another story equally revealing about the power of intrinsic motivation concerning a boy who had a chronic problem with bedwetting.
Yes, this kid slept in a bed with his grandmother, and he was continually wetting the bed. The parents had tried everything in the traditional arsenal. Scolding, shaming, spanking, begging, nothing worked.
Because absolutely none of those tactics addressed what the boy actually wanted. Shame only creates anxiety, which often exacerbates the very physiological issue they were trying to cure.
Right.
They finally sat down and realized the boy had a deep, underlying desire. He wanted to feel grown up. He wanted to wear pajamas like his dad, not nightgowns like his grandmother. And he desperately wanted his own bed.
He wanted autonomy.
Exactly. So instead of punishing him, they took him to a department store. And here is the crucial detail. They didn't just walk in, buy a bed, and have it delivered. They let him pick it out. The mother discreetly talked to the saleswoman and said, "Here is a young gentleman who would like to do some shopping."
They elevated his status. They made him feel incredibly important and independent.
Yes. He examined the beds. He made the choice. He took psychological ownership of the purchase.
And when the bed was finally delivered to his room, the father came in to admire it. The father looks at the boy and says, "You aren't going to wet this bed, are you?"
And the boy stands tall and promises he won't.
And he didn't. He stopped wetting the bed immediately. Why? Because his personal pride was heavily involved. It wasn't his grandmother's bed anymore. It was his bed. He had purchased it. He was acting like a man, and men do not wet their own beds.
It all comes down to the psychology of ownership.
But wait, let me pause and ask a hard question here. Because listening to these stories in sequence, the finger painting trick, the bully motivation, the department store bed, if we are being truly critical, is this just about tricking people? Is this whole philosophy just about wrapping a bitter pill in a piece of cheese like you would for a dog and pretending it's a fun game? Because if it is just trickery, it feels manipulative and ultimately unsustainable.
That is a critical distinction to make, and it cuts to the absolute core of why this works long term. And the answer goes back to a profound quote included in the text from the critic William Winter.
What did he say?
He remarked that self-expression is the dominant necessity of human nature. This is not about cheap trickery. It is about facilitating psychological ownership. Human beings, whether they are a 3-year-old toddler or a 50-year-old corporate executive, deeply and instinctively resent being told what to do.
Absolutely.
The moment you tell someone what to do, You have made them a subordinate, you have stripped them of their agency, and their immediate reflex will be to resist, simply to prove they still have free will.
So when you just hand them the answer or demand compliance, you trigger their defenses.
Exactly. But when you create an environment where the other person is allowed to, as the text beautiful phrases it, cook and stir the idea themselves, everything changes.
Cook and stir the idea. I love that.
By tying the action to their own desires, they take ownership of it. It ceases to be your mandate. It becomes their brilliant idea. It becomes an expression of their own will and their own identity. You aren't tricking them. You are aligning the necessary action with their authentic self-expression.
So the immense practical takeaway for you listening, especially if you are dealing with chronic stubbornness in your life, is that the solution is almost never to push harder.
Never.
It is to stop treating people like subordinates who must submit to your superior logic or your unyielding authority. You have to completely reframe your objective as the exclusive gateway to their deepest desire. You have to structure the scenario so that they choose the action themselves because it serves them.
Perfectly stated. And if you are sitting there thinking that this psychology only applies to managing children or domestic disputes, wait until we examine how exactly this same framework governs high-stakes, cutthroat business communication.
Oh, let's scale this up right now. Let's look at how this operates when the stakes are massive, when egos are huge, and when money is on the line. I call this the Henry Ford secret.
The Henry Ford secret.
Yeah. Applying this principle to high-level business means stepping completely, 100%, into the other person's shoes. Dale Carnegie, the author of the source text, shares a personal anecdote here that is, without exaggeration, an absolute masterclass in high-stakes negotiation.
The hotel ballroom story. It is a legendary example of cognitive empathy in action.
Yes. So, paint the picture. Carnegie used to rent the grand ballroom of a major New York hotel for 20 nights every single season to hold a highly lucrative series of lectures.
Right.
This was a cornerstone of his business. One season, after all the tickets were already printed, after thousands of announcements had been distributed across the city, he suddenly gets a letter from the hotel management. They are informing him that his rent is being increased by almost 300%.
That is a pure nightmare scenario for any entrepreneur or event organizer. You are totally leveraged. The hotel knows you are trapped, and they are squeezing you.
Exactly. Now let's think about how the average emotionally reactive person would handle this.
Oh, I know how I'd handle it.
Most people would storm into the hotel manager's office, absolute furious, veins popping. They would complain bitterly about the sheer unfairness of it all. They would scream, "My tickets are already printed. I have announcements everywhere. I cannot possibly change venues now. You're ruining my entire business model."
Which is, once again, 100% I-focused. It is Dale Carnegie forcefully handing the hotel manager a giant bowl of his own personal strawberries and cream.
Exactly.
He is telling the hotel manager all about Dale Carnegie's severe problems. And realistically, what does the manager of a massive New York hotel care about Dale Carnegie's printing costs?
Zero. Absolutely nothing. The manager cares exclusively about the hotel's revenue and utilization.
Yeah.
So Carnegie, being the master of this philosophy, does not do that. He suppresses his panic and his ego.
He takes a breath.
He walks calmly into the manager's office, and he opens with an incredible display of empathy. He says, "I was a bit shocked when I got your letter, but I don't blame you at all. If I had been in your position, sitting in your chair, I should probably have written a similar letter myself."
That's disarming.
Right. He continues, "Your duty as the manager is to make all the profit possible for this hotel. If you don't do that, you will be fired, and you should be fired. Now let's take a piece of paper and write down the exact advantages and the disadvantages that will accrue to you, the hotel, if you insist on this massive increase in rent."
I want to highlight the phrasing there because it is surgically precise. He does not say the disadvantages to me. He says the disadvantages that will accrue to you.
Yes, he takes a piece of paper, draws a line down the middle, and writes advantages on one side. He says, advantage, ballroom free. He explains that by kicking him out, the hotel can now rent the grand ballroom for dances and corporate conventions, which will absolutely pay a much higher nightly rate than his lecture series.
He openly acknowledges their primary driving desire, maximizing immediate revenue. That builds immense trust.
Then, he calmly moves to the disadvantages column. First, he points out that instead of increasing the hotel's income from him, they're actually going to reduce it to zero. Why? Because he simply cannot pay the 300% increase and will be forced to take his business to a competing venue.
Makes sense.
Second, and this is where he leverages their secondary desire, He points out that his lectures bring thousands of highly educated, cultured, wealthy people into the hotel lobby every night. He looks at the manager and asks, if you spent $5,000 advertising in the major newspapers, you couldn't bring as many high net worth individuals to physically look at your hotel as my lectures do? That foot traffic and brand association is worth a massive amount of money to the hotel, isn't it?
It is a stunningly objective reality check. He doesn't beg, he doesn't complain, he just leaves the piece of paper on the manager's desk and asks him to think it over carefully and make the best decision for the hotel.
And the result of this egoless negotiation. The next day, he gets a letter stating that his rent increase was dropped from 300% to just 50%.
Incredible.
And the most incredible part, he secured this massive business-saving reduction without ever speaking one single syllable about what he wanted or the disaster it would cause him.
But I want to anticipate a very natural pushback here from our listener. Someone analyzing this might say, hold on a second, wasn't Dale Carnegie just making a highly polished, veiled threat?
Right.
He essentially walked in and said, lower the rent or I'm walking away and taking my wealthy crowd to your competitor. How is that any different from just threatening them?
That is a really fair challenge. If you just look at the raw transactional mechanics of what happened, it absolutely looks like a threat. Do this or else I leave.
But the profound distinction, the reason it worked without causing the manager to become defensive, lies entirely in the delivery, the tone, and the orientation of the argument.
Okay, break that down.
A threat is inherently hostile. It's adversarial and ego-driven. You do this for me or I will punish you. It creates an immediate power struggle. What Carnegie did was frame the objective economic facts entirely from the manager's own perspective.
Right. He validated the goal.
He actively validated the manager's goal maximizing hotel profit and then calmly, analytically demonstrated how the proposed rent hike might actually sabotage that specific goal. He positioned himself not as a victim complaining about his plight, nor as an adversary making a threat, but as a neutral consultant analyzing the hotel's business model.
That is so smart.
Henry Ford captured this exact ethos perfectly when he said, if there is any one secret of success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from that angle as well as from your own.
And yet, as simple, elegant, and historically proven as that Henry Ford quote is, the book rightly points out that 90% of people ignore it 90% of the time in their professional lives.
Oh, without a doubt.
There's a brutal, agonizingly relatable breakdown of a corporate business letter in the text that perfectly illustrates this failure. It is a letter written by the superintendent of a massive freight terminal sent out to one of their clients.
The Zariga terminal letter. It is genuinely painful to read, primarily because anyone who has worked in a corporate environment receives an email exactly like this at least once a week.
It really is the ultimate archetype of bad communication.
Yeah.
So the superintendent writes this formal letter basically complaining that his receiving station is getting overly congested in the late afternoon. Why? Because too many of his clients' trucks are dropping off freight at the absolute last minute before closing.
Right.
So he writes this incredibly arrogant draft. He says things like, we want our terminal clear. He writes, it is of the utmost importance to us that our trucks be routed differently. It is entirely blindly focused on we want our terminal, our trucks, our convenience.
Now, put yourself in the shoes of the client receiving that letter. How do you feel? You do not care even a fraction of an ounce about the terminal's internal congestion problems.
Not my monkeys, not my circus.
In fact, receiving a demanding, pompous letter instructing you to radically change your own expensive logistics operations just to make some other company's life slightly easier usually generates immediate, visceral antagonism. Your reflex is to say, not my problem, figure it out.
Right. You want to send your trucks even later just to spite them.
Exactly.
So the book suggests a complete rewrite of this letter. Instead of complaining about the terminal's operational headaches, the rewrite focuses entirely on the client's operational goals. The rewritten letter says, in effect, we know your primary goal is to get your trucks unloaded and back on the road making money as quickly as possible.
A completely different hook.
Yes. But currently, when you send them late in the afternoon, they get stuck in our unavoidable congestion, your drivers are delayed, and you lose time. To help your trucks get moving much faster, if you schedule your deliveries in the morning, your trucks will breeze right through, your drivers won't be frustrated, and your freight will ship faster.
It is a breathtaking pivot. The exact same operational changes being requested, send the trucks earlier. But the first letter demands a costly favor to solve the terminal's problem. The second letter offers a highly valuable solution to the client's own problem. It's a brilliant tactical shift from demanding compliance to offering an upgrade.
It reminds me of the classic story about the billionaire industrialist Andrew Carnegie and his nephews.
Oh, this is a great one.
Carnegie bet a friend $100 that he could get his famously unresponsive nephews at Yale to write him back immediately. These kids were notorious for completely ignoring their family's frantic letters. They were too busy being college students to care about writing home.
So what was his strategy? Did he write a letter scolding them for their lack of respect? Did he demand they fulfill their familial duties?
No. He knew that would just result in more silence. He wrote a light, chatty letter asking about their studies. But at the very end, he casually mentioned in a postscript that he was enclosing a $5 bill for each of them, which is a decent amount of spending money back then.
The bait.
But deliberately, he intentionally left the money out of the envelope before he sealed it.
A masterstroke of psychological manipulation in the most amusing way possible.
The replies came back by return mail, faster than ever before. Dear Uncle Andrew, thank you so much for the lovely letter. You are the best uncle, but by the way, you forgot to include the money.
He perfectly understood their primary interest as college students was cash. He didn't demand they care about him. He baited the hook with what they already cared about.
So, synthesizing this into a practical framework for the listener, the next time you draft an important email, whether it is to a difficult client, a demanding boss, or an unresponsive colleague, do not hit send immediately.
Right, take a breath.
Institute a mandatory review process. Read through it and brutally delete or rephrase every single sentence that starts with I need or I want. Force yourself to rewrite the entire message around what the recipient gains. If you cannot creatively frame your request as a tangible benefit to them, you simply have not thought about the problem hard enough yet.
That is an exceptionally rigorous and effective rule of thumb. However, whenever we venture into this territory, whenever we discuss the mechanics of finding someone's core vulnerable desire and actively leveraging it to maneuver them into doing what we want, we inevitably hit a major boundary that we must address. We have to confront the mechanics of intention.
Yes, we are talking about the anti-manipulation clause. Because let's be brutally honest for a moment. To a skeptical ear, some of what we are discussing sounds remarkably similar to dark psychology.
It does.
Finding someone's psychological weak spot, figuring out exactly what they covet, and using that intimate knowledge to maneuver them into executing your agenda. A listener might justifiably ask, how is this mechanically different from what a con artist or a cult leader does?
It is the most vital structural distinction in this entire philosophy, and the source text is incredibly explicit about this boundary, not just as a moral guideline, but as a practical necessity for long-term success. The text states, and I quote directly, "Looking at the other person's point of view and arousing in him an eager want for something is not to be construed as manipulating that person so that he will do something that is only for your benefit and his detriment. Each party should gain from the negotiation."
It is the difference between a positive-sum game and a zero-sum game. Win-win versus coercion.
Precisely.
Okay.
We can look at this entirely through the lens of psychological mechanics, leaving morality aside for a moment. Manipulation operates on a zero-sum architecture. It is inherently win-lose. I find your weakness, I exploit your desires, I extract what I want, and you are left materially or psychologically worse off. When the victim eventually realizes they have been exploited, and they always do, they will never trust you again, and they will likely seek retribution. It is a terrible long-term strategy. True influence, however, is structurally positive sum. It is win-win. I do the hard work to find out what you deeply want. I find a creative way to actually deliver that to you, and in fair exchange, I get what I want. Both parties walk away energized and enriched.
The story of the Shell oil station manager in the text is a phenomenal blueprint of this positive sum dynamic. You have a man named Michael Whitten, who is a territory salesman for Shell Oil. His personal burning desire is to be the #1 salesman in his entire district.
Okay.
But there is one major roadblock. One specific service station in his territory is completely dragging his numbers down. It is run by an older manager who has lost his passion. The station is dirty, the service is slow, and sales are in a steep decline.
Now, analyze Michael's options. He could have utilized zero-sum coercion. He could have walked in, threatened the older manager, reported him to corporate headquarters, or tried to manipulate him through fear of losing his pension.
He could have pushed the calf.
Exactly.
But instead, Michael did something brilliant. He took the older manager on a little field trip. He drove him across town to visit a booming, immaculate, state-of-the-art Shell station in a different territory. Michael didn't preach. He didn't scold. He just let the older manager walk around and absorb the contrast. He let him see, physically, the potential of what a truly great station looked like.
He aroused an eager want through environmental design. The older manager saw the gleaming gas pumps, the high volume of happy customers, the immense pride radiating from the employees. He remembered why he got into the business in the first place. He felt the sudden, intense desire to excel again, to have a station that commanded that level of respect.
And what happened? He went back, completely transformed his attitude, and cleaned up his own station. His sales skyrocketed. Now let's analyze the mechanics of the outcome. Who won here? Did Michael manipulate and exploit the old man?
No, the structure was perfectly positive sum. Both of them achieved their goals. Michael got his territory sales numbers up, which served his ambition to be number one. The older manager revitalized his failing business, undoubtedly increased his own personal income, and, most importantly, regained his professional pride and dignity. It was a flawless mutual alignment of interests.
It is the exact same underlying architecture in the story of Mrs. Anderson and the bank job. Mrs. Anderson desperately wanted a job at a specific, prestigious bank. The zero-sum, ego-driven approach would have been to send a desperate resume begging for work, detailing how much she needed a paycheck and how hard she was willing to work to get it.
Which forces the bank to act as a charity, taking on her burden.
Right. But she didn't do that. She researched the bank extensively. She discovered that they were expanding rapidly and struggling with the administrative load. So she wrote a highly targeted letter identifying their specific growing pains and offered her specialized skills as the exact solution they needed to achieve their expansion goals smoothly.
That's how you do it.
She positioned herself not as a burden asking for a handout, but as a high-value asset, offering a solution to their immediate problems.
She didn't manipulate the bank into hiring an unqualified person. She aligned her personal desire for employment seamlessly with their corporate desire for competent, stabilizing staff to handle their chaotic expansion. It demonstrates a fundamental mechanical respect for the agency, the intelligence, and the needs of the other party.
So as we begin to synthesize all of this, if we pull back and look at the entire tapestry of stories, from the toddler refusing kindergarten to Dale Carnegie negotiating his hotel rent, to the Shell oil salesman, what is the grand unifying theory we are really looking at here?
We are looking at the profound, somewhat humbling realization that true sustainable influence is never, ever about coercion. It is never about pushing, demanding, out-arguing, or forcing your will onto the fabric of the world.
It is not about violently muscling the calf into the barn while you both get bruised in the process.
Exactly. True influence is about the elegance of alignment. It is the sophisticated art of stepping completely outside your own ego, packing up your own strawberries and cream, and diligently searching for the intrinsic motivation that is already burning brightly inside someone else. Once you locate that fire, your only job, your only required action, is to simply, clearly show them how your idea, your product, or your request acts as fuel for their fire.
He who can do this has the whole world with him. He who cannot walks a lonely way. It is a principle that completely re-engineers how you look at every single conversation, every email you draft, every argument you have with a loved one. It is about front-loading the hard, cognitive work of genuine empathy so that the actual execution, the actual moment of influence, becomes utterly effortless.
It is the ultimate psychological shortcut to being highly effective in the world, achieved paradoxically by accepting that the world does not, in fact, revolve around you.
I love that framing. Positive sum egoism through cognitive empathy. And that brings us to the end of today's deep dive. But do not go anywhere, because next time we are exploring a concept that is so incredibly simple it takes less than a single second to execute. Yet the legendary industrialist Charles Schwab claimed this one specific habit was worth over $1 million to his career. Get ready to discover the mechanics behind the most profitable facial expression in human history. We will see you then. Imagine you are sitting across from the most hated man in the world.
Okay.
Like, his own country has completely exiled him. Millions of people actively want him dead, and his psychological defenses are just, a mile high.
Right, he's basically a fortress.
Exactly. If you try to negotiate with him, he'll shut you down. If you argue with him, he's going to fight back with the ferocity of a cornered animal.
Naturally.
But, and here's the crazy part, one little boy managed to bypass all of that hostility and actually ended up living in his castle.
Which just sounds completely made up, but it's true.
Right. And how did he do it? By exploiting this biological loophole in the human brain that a golden retriever honestly understands better than most Fortune 500 CEOs.
I love that analogy so much.
I mean, we spend our entire lives trying to construct these elaborate bulletproof facades to force the world to be interested in us. We memorize our resumes, we curate our online profiles, we essentially put on a one-person off-Broadway show every time we enter a room.
Constantly performing.
Yeah, but what if the actual secret to being welcome anywhere, and I mean absolutely anywhere, requires doing the exact opposite? What if influence isn't about being the most fascinating person in the room, but actually being the most fascinated?
It's the ultimate paradox of human relations, right?
Yeah.
And it's a paradox that most of us are just completely blind to.
Probably.
Like, we desperately want connection, we want influence, we want to be valued, and yet our default biological strategy for getting those things is completely backwards. We are essentially trying to pick a highly complex lock by jamming the wrong key into it over and over with increasing force and then just wondering why the door won't open.
Which brings us to the exact mission of today's deep dive. So for those of you listening right now, whether you're an entrepreneur trying to scale a business or a creative professional navigating a crowded industry, or even just someone who wants to walk into a room and instantly lower the temperature, we are unpacking a single transformative principle today.
The shift from inward-looking self-obsession to outward-looking genuine interest.
Exactly. We're using Chapter 4 of Dale Carnegie's legendary work, which is boldly titled, "Do This and You'll Be Welcome Anywhere," as our foundational text. But, we aren't stopping at just a simple book summary here.
Right, we need to go deeper.
Way deeper. We're cross-referencing this 1930s advice with modern studies on nonverbal leakage, the evolutionary biology of the human ego, and these wild historical case studies ranging from post-World War I Europe to high-stakes corporate espionage.
Because we really need to see why this works on a neurological level.
Right. So, to start us off, let's look at the baseline. Before we can understand why showing interest is so magnetic, we have to look at the disease it's curing. What is the fundamental biological reality of how human beings view themselves?
Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand the cure, you really must understand the pathology. And the pathology here is what we might call the I epidemic.
The I epidemic, I like that.
Yeah, because the baseline state of the human mind is not neutral. It just isn't. It is an absolute, all-consuming, relentless obsession with the self.
Which I guess makes perfect sense from a survival standpoint.
Oh, absolutely. From an evolutionary standpoint, this makes perfect sense. For hundreds of thousands of years, our brains have been wired to monitor one primary data stream. How does this environment affect my survival, my status, and my resource acquisition?
Right. If you didn't look out for yourself, you literally died.
Exactly. We are biologically programmed to be the center of our own universe. And the text illustrates this beautifully and somewhat humorously by contrasting our exhausting self-obsession with the natural, agenda-free charm of an animal.
Yes, the dog story.
The author shares the story about his childhood dog, Tippy. For 5 years, Tippy was his constant companion. And the brilliant observation made here is that Tippy never had to read a psychology book.
Right.
He never had to network, and he certainly never had to sell real estate to win friends. He relied entirely on a divine, instinctual mechanism, which is just showing genuine, unbridled excitement to see people.
The text states quite bluntly, and this is a great quote, that you can make more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in other people than you can in 2 years. By trying to get other people interested in you.
2 months versus 2 years.
That is a staggering return on investment. But when you think about it, a dog like Tippy represents a massive anomaly in human interaction, doesn't he?
How so?
Well, human interactions are almost always transactional. Like, we are always calculating the cost and the benefit of a relationship. But the dog represents a zero-cost, infinite yield emotional transaction.
That's a great way to put it.
The dog isn't, assessing your social status before wagging its tail.
Okay.
It's not trying to extract a favor from you. It's just pure, unadulterated validation.
And that is exactly the mechanism at play. Because that pure validation is so rare among human beings, we crave it desperately.
We really do.
To prove just how deep this self-obsession runs in our own species, the text points to a fascinating piece of linguistic data. The New York Telephone Company conducted a detailed study of telephone conversations to find out which word is the most frequently used.
Oh, I love this study.
They analyzed 500 conversations, and the winner was the personal pronoun I.
Just I.
I. It was used 3,900 times in 500 conversations.
Let's just pause on that density for a second. 3,900 times in 500 conversations.
It's a lot.
That is almost 8 times per conversation that the speaker is physically wrestling the spotlight back to their own coordinates.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, a wrestling match.
Imagine running that same study today on, like, a social media feed or a corporate Zoom call. The entire architecture of our communication is built around broadcasting our own existence to the void.
It really is. And the text uses an analogy that I think hits painfully close to home for all of us. It asks, when you look at a group photograph that you are in, whose picture do you look for first? Oh man, every single time.
It is universally true. You do not look at your best friend. You don't admire the stunning mountain range in the background. You zoom directly in on your own face.
Every single time. You could be in a photograph with, I don't know, a reigning monarch, a Nobel laureate, and a famous movie star, and your first thought is still, is my hair doing that weird thing? Are my eyes half closed? Do I look okay?
Exactly. We are inescapably trapped in our own perspective.
And I want to push back on this a little bit because I can hear someone listening to this right now thinking, sure, we are a little vain. We like looking at ourselves in photos, but is it really that simple? Are we really so universally self-obsessed that just showing a tiny bit of interest in someone else acts as some kind of psychological magic trick?
What's fascinating here is that it is not just a magic trick. It's an exploit of our neurobiology.
Okay, an exploit.
Yeah. The reason it works so powerfully is directly tied to what you mentioned earlier, the transactional nature of life. Because everyone around you is broadcasting on that I frequency, we all develop a low-level defensive armor, like we're always bracing ourselves.
Right. We are constantly bracing for someone to sell us something, to use us, or to compete with us for status. So when you break that pattern, when you suspend your own ego long enough to actively validate someone else's existence without asking for anything in return, you bypass the amygdala's threat detection system entirely.
Wow.
You become a massive positive anomaly in their environment. You are providing the one resource that the human brain is starving for, which is genuine validation.
So the practical translation for you listening to this deep dive right now is this: stop trying to wigwag other people into being interested in you.
Wigwag, I love that word.
That's the exact phrase the text uses, wigwag. I just picture someone standing on a deserted island, waving a giant neon flag, jumping up and down, shouting, "Look at my resume. Look at my vacation photos. Look at how smart I am."
And no one is looking.
Exactly. The effort is completely wasted because everyone else is on their own island waving their own flag. Nobody is looking. Instead, you have to put down the flag, get in a boat, row over to their island, and study them.
Beautifully said.
But this brings up a critical transition point because, being like Tippy the dog, wagging your tail and making people feel good, that sounds wonderful for personal friendships. It sounds great for a low-stakes dinner party.
Sure.
But how does this translate to hard-nosed, competitive professional environments? Does this outward-looking principle actually matter if you were in a solitary technical field, or if you're a hard-driving executive who only cares about the bottom line?
Oh, it matters more than almost any technical skill you possess.
Really?
Yes. The text makes a stark pivot here from a nice behavioral suggestion to a very severe professional warning. A lack of genuine interest in your fellow human beings doesn't just make you an awkward conversationalist. It practically guarantees a severe ceiling on your professional success.
Even in technical fields?
Even in fields that appear purely creative, highly independent, or deeply technical.
Well, the text brings in a very heavy quote from the famous Viennese psychologist Alfred Adler to back that up. He wrote a book called What Life Should Mean to You, and his conclusion is just brutal.
It is.
He states, "It is the individual who is not interested in his fellow men, who has the greatest difficulties in life, and provides the greatest injury to others. It is from among such individuals that all human failures spring."
All human failures spring.
Think about the absolute nature of that statement. He isn't just saying that self-obsessed people are annoying. He is diagnosing them as the root cause of personal and societal collapse.
And Adler's perspective is vital here because it elevates this concept from, a clever networking trick to a fundamental psychological law. Adler's entire school of individual psychology relied on a concept called Gemeinschaftsgefühl.
Say that again, Gemeinschafts.
Gemeinschaftsgefühl. It translates roughly to community feeling or social interest. His argument was that human beings are fundamentally social creatures, and any attempt to operate outside of that social interest is a pathology. If you are disconnected from the human element, You cannot effectively navigate reality because reality is constructed by humans. And the text provides a fascinating example of this in a realm we typically view as incredibly solitary writing fiction.
Right, the classic image of the tortured, isolated novelist locked in a cabin somewhere.
Exactly.
The text recounts this story at a hard-boiled magazine editor giving a lecture to a fiction writing course at New York University. And this editor, who has presumably seen thousands of manuscripts, stands up and says that he can pick up any story, read just a few paragraphs, and know instantly if the author likes people.
And his conclusion is really the commercial application of Adler's psychological law. The editor stated that if the author doesn't like people, people won't like their stories.
Wow.
He even paused midway through his lecture to apologize to the students for sounding like a preacher, but he insisted that this is the inescapable bottom line of the creative industry. You have to be interested in people if you want to be a successful writer.
I look at that through the lens of empathy simulation. Like, fiction is essentially just the author creating an empathy simulation for the reader.
That's an interesting way to frame it.
If the author is entirely self-obsessed, they literally lack the data required to build a realistic simulation of another human being. It's like trying to cook a 5-course meal for someone when you despise all the ingredients and you don't care about the guest's allergies.
The food's going to be terrible.
Exactly. It doesn't matter how technically proficient you are with a chef's knife. The food is going to taste bitter, and the guest is going to leave unsatisfied.
That is a perfect analogy. And if we extrapolate that beyond writing, it explains why this rule governs every industry. No matter what your business is, whether you are writing a novel, coding enterprise software, designing architecture, or selling medical devices, your ultimate end user is always a human being. Your product must interface with human psychology. So if you are deeply disconnected from human interest, if you lack the curiosity to understand the friction points, fears, and desires of the people you are serving, your product will fail to resonate.
Yeah, the code might compile perfectly, but the user interface will be a nightmare because you didn't care enough to understand how a frustrated user actually thinks.
Precisely.
So for the listener, this requires a deeply honest self-audit. Before you spend $10,000 on another coding boot camp or, fly to a seminar on advanced negotiation tactics, you need to audit your baseline human interest skills.
Because your professional ceiling is not dictated by your technical chops.
No, it's dictated by your genuine curiosity about the people you serve. If you view them as mere statistics or obstacles or just wallets to be emptied, they will subconsciously detect that hostility and they will reject you.
They absolutely will.
Which brings me to a massive contradiction. If genuine interest is an absolute requirement for stratospheric success, how do the top performers, the people at the absolute pinnacle of their industries who are dealing with thousands of people and unbelievable stress, how do they actually execute this?
That's a great question.
Surely they get tired. Surely they deal with annoying, frustrating individuals. Do they just paste on a fake smile? Is it all just high-level acting?
No, because faking it is the amateur strategy, and it is doomed to fail. Doomed. The absolute top tier of performers do not rely on acting because they understand a fundamental truth about human neurobiology. We possess incredibly sensitive, highly evolved radar for insincerity.
Right.
Instead of faking it, the masters consciously and deliberately cultivate a deep internal state of affection and gratitude for their audience. They manage their internal environment so that the external signals take care of themselves.
Okay, explain that.
Well, the text uses the extraordinary story of Howard Thurston to illustrate the mechanics of this internal management.
Oh, Howard Thurston. He was the acknowledged dean of magicians in his era, right?
Yes, he played to over 60 million people over the course of his career and made millions of dollars.
Now, if you think about a stage magician, their entire livelihood is predicated on deception. It is sleight of hand, it is misdirection, it is mechanical illusion. You would assume his success was entirely based on his technical ability to hide a card or make a rabbit disappear.
Thurston certainly had world-class technical skills, but he explicitly told the author that his mechanics were not his secret weapon. His true differentiator was his psychological posture toward the audience.
His posture.
Yeah. He noted that many of his peers, the other magicians on the circuit, would stand behind the curtain, look out at the crowd, and mutter to themselves, "Look at all these rubes out there, a bunch of suckers, I'm gonna fool them all."
Wow. So their internal baseline was superiority, contempt, and adversarial ego.
Exactly. They viewed the audience as opponents to be conquered in a battle of wits. But Thurston ran a completely different internal operating system. He realized that his entire life, his immense wealth, his ability to travel the world, all of it was entirely funded by the people sitting in those seats.
Right, they were paying for his life.
So before he ever stepped foot on stage, he engaged in a very specific, deliberate mental ritual. He would stand behind the curtain and repeatedly say to himself, "I love my audience. I love my audience."
That is so simple, but so profound.
He would actively flood his mind with gratitude, reminding himself, "I'm grateful because these people come to see me. They make it possible for me to make my living in a very agreeable way. I'm going to give them the very best I possibly can."
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I want to tear this apart. This is where the conventional understanding of being nice falls apart for me.
Okay, how so?
Because Thurston wasn't doing anything the audience could explicitly hear.
Right.
He wasn't walking out on stage with a microphone and shouting, "Hello, Cleveland! I am filled with gratitude for your financial patronage."
No, obviously not.
This was entirely an internal monologue happening in the dark behind a velvet curtain. If he's just out there doing the exact same card tricks as the guy who hates the audience,
Yeah.
why does his silent internal monologue change the outcome of the show?
It changes the outcome because of a phenomenon known in psychology as nonverbal leakage.
Nonverbal leakage.
Yes. Human communication is overwhelmingly nonverbal. We have specialized areas in our brain, like the fusiform face area, that are evolutionarily designed to detect microexpressions, muscle tension, and pupil dilation in milliseconds. If you try to fake genuine interest, it requires massive cognitive load.
Okay, let's use a modern analogy for that,
Mhm.
because I think this is crucial. Faking interest is like trying to run a state-of-the-art 4K video game on an ancient, outdated computer processor.
That's a great way to think about it.
The cognitive load of trying to suppress your own ego, maintain your lie, remember your script, and artificially generate all the micro-expressions of empathy, it takes up so much of your brain's RAM that your system eventually lags.
Yes.
And the insincerity leaks out in that lag.
Precisely. The cognitive load is simply too high to sustain. If you secretly believe the audience is a bunch of rubes, your face will inevitably betray you. It might be a micro sneer lasting a fraction of a second, a slight stiffness in the shoulders, or a subtle coldness in your vocal tone.
And the audience picks up on that.
They might not consciously register the microexpression, but their limbic system does. They feel a sense of unease. They feel like they are being manipulated. But Thurston eliminated the cognitive load by actually changing his internal state.
So he didn't have to fake anything.
Right. By cultivating a mindset of genuine gratitude, his body language naturally, effortlessly aligned with warmth. He didn't have to fake a Duchenne smile, which is a genuine smile that reaches the eyes, because he was actually feeling it. The audience felt that safety and warmth, and as a result, they were infinitely more receptive to his performance.
So the practical takeaway here is what we can call Thurston's mantra. You have to try this before your next high-stakes interaction.
Highly recommend it.
Before you walk into a difficult sales pitch, before you log on to a tense board meeting, or even before you walk through your front door after a grueling commute. Just pause for 10 seconds. Actively remind yourself why you are grateful for the people on the other side of that door.
Find a reason.
Right. Say to yourself, I am grateful for this client because they challenged me to build better systems. I am grateful for my team because they carry the weight of this project. Find a genuine reason to appreciate them. It will completely rewire the nonverbal energy you bring into the room, and people will react to you differently before you even speak your first word.
It is a profound shift. But we must address the obvious limitation of Thurston's scenario.
Which is?
Thurston was showing gratitude to an audience that was already in their seats.
Ah, right.
They had already bought the ticket. They were a captive audience.
True. It's easy to be grateful for people who are currently throwing money at you.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens when you are on the outside looking in? Like, how does this outward-looking principle work when you are trying to get the attention of highly successful, incredibly busy, intimidating individuals?
The unreachable people.
Yes, people who seemingly have absolutely no reason to give you a fraction of their time.
This is where the principle moves from relationship maintenance to high-level strategic influence. The text demonstrates that you can win the time, attention, and active cooperation of even the most sought-after people on Earth by offering them something incredibly rare.
And what's that?
Thoroughly researched, genuine admiration.
And the text gives us two phenomenal case studies of this. Let's look at the first one, which involves the author himself. He was running a course on writing at the Brooklyn Institute of Arts and Sciences, and he decided he wanted the absolute biggest literary stars of the day to come speak to his students.
Right.
We were talking about massive names like Kathleen Norris, Fannie Hurst, and Ida Tarbell. Now, if you understand the daily life of a famous author, you know they are bombarded with requests.
Hmm.
If he had just written a standard letter saying, "Hi, I'm running a course. We'd love to have you. Will you please do us a favor and speak?" That letter goes straight into the fireplace.
Of course it does. A direct ask for a favor from a stranger triggers an immediate defensive shield. It is a withdrawal from their emotional and temporal bank account, and the author hasn't made any deposits.
So he completely changed the geometry of the request. Instead of asking for a favor, he sent letters that were signed by all the students in the course. And these letters did not start with a request. They started with deep, specific admiration.
Even the key, specific admiration.
The students expressed how profoundly they respected the author's work and stated a sincere, burning desire to learn the secrets of their success. They didn't position the authors as resources to be extracted. They positioned them as masters to be revered. And the strategy worked flawlessly.
It's amazing.
These incredibly busy, wealthy individuals trekked all the way over to Brooklyn to spend their evenings sharing their wisdom with a room full of strangers.
It is a brilliant execution of the principle. But the second example the text provides pushes the boundary even further. It shows how genuine interest can not only open doors, but actually overcome active, virulent hostility.
The Kaiser story.
Yes, this is the story of the German Kaiser Wilhelm in the immediate aftermath of World War I.
To put it mildly, this is the ultimate PR nightmare.
Nightmare doesn't even cover it. At the close of the war, Kaiser Wilhelm was arguably the most universally despised human being on the planet. Millions of people blamed him for the unprecedented slaughter of the Great War. His own nation, the people he had ruled, turned against him with absolute fury.
He had to run.
He was forced to flee to Holland just to avoid being executed. The text explicitly notes that millions of people would have gladly torn him limb from limb. The hatred directed at him was like a global forest fire.
So you have a man who was living in exile, surrounded by guards, hyper-paranoid, and fully aware that the entire world hates him. And amidst all this darkness, a little boy writes him a letter.
A little boy in Holland wrote the Kaiser a simple, sincere letter, and what is brilliant about this letter is what it did not contain. It didn't debate the geopolitics of the war, it didn't ask for money, it was just a letter glowing with kindliness and genuine admiration.
Wow.
The boy wrote that no matter what the rest of the world thought, no matter what the newspaper said, he would always love Wilhelm as his emperor.
I have to pause here because the psychological mechanism is fascinating. The Kaiser is drowning in a sea of hatred and condemnation. Every piece of mail he gets is likely a death threat. And suddenly, here is a single beacon of pure, non-transactional validation. What happened?
Well, the Kaiser was so deeply moved, so starved for genuine human connection amidst the hatred, that he invited the little boy to come visit him in exile.
Incredible.
The boy went, his mother went with him, and this is historical fact that sounds like fiction. The Kaiser ended up marrying the mother.
Wait. The Kaiser married the mother.
He did.
That escalated in a way I was not prepared for. A letter of admiration turned into a royal marriage. Now, I have to play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
I'm looking at both of these stories. The students writing to the famous authors, and the boy writing to the disgraced Kaiser. My cynical alarm bells are ringing. Isn't this just buttering people up? Isn't this just highly sophisticated flattery? Oh, you were so brilliant. Please tell us your secrets.
Right.
We just spent 10 minutes establishing that human beings, especially successful ones, have highly evolved radar for insincerity. Why doesn't this approach immediately trigger their alarms?
That is the most important distinction in this entire analysis, and the text draws a very firm, unyielding line here. The difference between flattery and genuine admiration is the presence of sincerity.
Sincerity.
Flattery is shallow, selfish, and counterfeit. It is telling someone exactly what you think they want to hear for the sole purpose of extracting a benefit. Flattery triggers the alarm because it lacks depth, but genuine interest requires you to actually do the work to recognize the other person's real, tangible value.
Let me bring in the framework of costly signaling theory from evolutionary psychology to explain why this works.
Oh, perfect.
Costly signaling theory says that organisms only trust signals that require a significant investment of resources to produce, because cheap signals are easy to fake.
Exactly.
Flattery is a cheap signal. It takes 0 calories to say you're great. But genuine admiration is a costly signal. It requires time, research, empathy, and observation. The students in Brooklyn didn't just send a form letter. They read the books, they understood the themes, and they asked specific questions about the craft.
Right, they put in the work.
And the boy in Holland didn't send a generic fan letter. He offered emotional loyalty in the face of immense public pressure. The signal was costly, and therefore it was trusted.
Exactly. When you take the time to deeply research someone's work, when you understand the nuances of the company they've built, the code they've written, or the art they've created, your admiration is grounded in reality. You are validating their actual sacrifice and hard work, not just stroking their ego with cheap cliches.
And people can feel the difference.
Highly successful people are constantly bombarded with shallow, selfish requests. When a message arrives that demonstrates deeply researched, genuine admiration, it is incredibly refreshing. It proves to them that you have already invested your most valuable resource, your time, in them before you ever ask them to invest in you.
So if you are listening to this and you need to cold email a mentor, a massive prospect, or an industry leader, you must audit your outreach before you hit send. Look at the draft. If the word I appears more than the word you in the first paragraph, delete it.
Start over.
Spend 90% of your initial outreach focusing exclusively on their accomplishments. Highlight a specific article they published, point out a strategic pivot they made in their business, and explain exactly why you genuinely admire the mechanics of what they did. Do the heavy lifting to find their real value. Only after you have established that costly signal of genuine interest should you gently, almost as an afterthought, introduce what you hope to learn from them.
It completely flips the power dynamic.
It really does.
But as powerful as this is, it still relies on a baseline of neutrality or mild curiosity. What happens when the situation is not neutral?
Exactly my next point. Both Thurston and the Kaiser examples and the Brooklyn authors rely on either a pre-existing audience or a neutral playing field. But let's look at the hardest possible environment. What if you are in a zero-sum game?
High stakes.
What if the person sitting across the table from you is a staunch adversary? What if their literal job description is to block your progress, to deny your request, or to defeat you? In that scenario, showing admiration is going to look incredibly suspicious. How does the brain process validation when it is fully primed to expect a threat?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where the principle of genuine interest transitions into what we might call psychological judo.
Psychological judo.
Yes. When you are facing a difficult person, a corporate rival, or a hostile adversary, their cognitive armor is fully deployed. Their amygdala is highly active. They are in a state of fight or flight, expecting a confrontation. If you meet them head-on with logical arguments, demands, or aggression, you just crash uselessly against that armor. You reinforce their defensive posture.
Right, you're just feeding their resistance.
But there is a back door into their prefrontal cortex, and it is found by discovering their hidden passions. If you can discover and authentically engage with an area of personal pride or passion that exists completely outside the parameters of your current conflict, you can bypass the armor entirely and melt their resistance.
The psychological judo. I love that term. You are using their own momentum to redirect the interaction. And the text provides 2 masterclasses in how to execute this. Let's dissect the first one, the story of Charles R. Walters.
Oh, this is a great...
Walters works for a major bank, and he is given a highly sensitive assignment. He needs to secure a confidential report on a specific corporation. The catch is that the only person on Earth who possesses this information is the president of that corporation. So Walters secures a meeting and walks into the president's office.
And we need to establish the context of this meeting. This president is notorious for being difficult, tight-lipped, and highly defensive. Walters is walking into the lion's den. Now, right before Walters has a chance to state his business, a secretary pokes her head into the office and informs the president that she doesn't have any stamps for him today. The president, slightly distracted, explains to Walters that he is collecting rare postage stamps for his 12-year-old son.
Now, in a normal adversarial negotiation, Walters would completely ignore that trivial detail. He's a serious banker on a serious mission. So the meeting proceeds. Walters states his case. He lays out his logical arguments for why the bank needs the report, and the president gives him absolutely nothing.
Zero.
The direct, logical approach fails completely. The president is vague, defensive, and politely ushers Walters out the door empty-handed. He crashed into the armor.
But Walters possessed a high degree of situational awareness. He remembered the brief interaction with the secretary. He identified the hidden passion, the son's stamp collection.
He found the back door.
Exactly. So he regroups. The next day, Walters discovers that the foreign department of his own bank processes mail from all over the world and has a massive collection of rare foreign stamps. He gathers these stamps, goes back to the president's office, and instead of asking for a meeting about the confidential report, he sends in a message saying he has some rare stamps for the president's boy.
And the dynamic shifts instantaneously. The door flies open.
The door flies open. The executive who was a brick wall the day before is now beaming with joy. He invites Walters in, and they spend the next half hour entirely focused on the stamps. The president is showing Walters pictures of his son, explaining the origin of the stamps, completely disarmed. Walters has successfully bypassed the threat detection system.
And here is the true magic of the hidden passions approach. Without Walters ever having to bring up the awkward subject of the confidential report, the executive, riding a wave of dopamine and gratitude, spends the next hour giving Walters every single piece of data he wanted.
Unprompted.
Completely unprompted. He calls in his subordinates, he pulls out private files, he dictates memos, he gives Walters vastly more information than Walters originally asked for.
Yeah.
He went from a hostile adversary to an enthusiastic ally, all because Walters shifted his focus from his own corporate agenda to a 12-year-old's hobby.
It perfectly illustrates the neuroscience of status and reward. When Walters engaged with the stamp collection, he wasn't just being nice, he was triggering a dopamine release in the executive's brain.
Right.
Studies show that talking about our own passions and our own children activates the exact same reward centers in the brain as receiving money or eating good food. Walters provided the neurological reward, and the executive reciprocated with the corporate data.
That's wild. The second example the text gives highlights this status shift even more clearly. It's the story of C.M. Naffel Jr., a fuel dealer in Philadelphia. Now, Naffel absolutely despised chain stores. He genuinely believed they were destroying the fabric of the nation. He was so vocal about his hatred that he was invited to participate in a public debate on the menace of the chain store.
Sounds intense.
But he was a smart guy. He knew he couldn't just go up there and rant. He needed hard facts.
So he decides to go straight into the belly of the beast. He secures a meeting with a high-ranking executive of one of the largest chain store organizations in the country. This is the ultimate adversarial setup, a vocal critic walking into the office of the man he publicly criticizes.
But Naffel executes a flawless piece of psychological judo. Instead of walking in and aggressively demanding answers or starting a debate, Naffel immediately lowers his own status and elevates the executive status.
Brilliant.
He says, "I am not here to sell you fuel. I am here because I need a favor. I have been asked to debate against chain stores, and I realize that, to be fair, I need to understand the other side of the argument. Could you tell me why you believe in what you do? I want to learn from your expertise."
The brilliance of that framing cannot be overstated. By asking for the executive's help, Naffel completely recategorized their relationship. They were no longer combatants. They were a curious student and a benevolent mentor. The executive's amygdala, which was likely primed for an argument, instantly deactivated. Instead, his prefrontal cortex engaged, flooded with the serotonin that comes from feeling respected and authoritative. The executive wasn't defending his corporation against an attack. He was graciously educating someone who recognized his expertise.
And the result is staggering. The executive, who is undoubtedly a very busy man, talks for an hour and 47 minutes.
An hour and 47 minutes.
He is glowing with pride as he defends his life's work. He pulls out data, he recommends books, he pours his heart into the explanation, and by the end of this deep dive into the executive's passion, Naffel's own mind is fundamentally changed. He sees the genuine value and the logistical genius behind the chain store model. The animosity evaporates on both sides.
But the true kicker, the ultimate proof of the principle, happens as Naffel is leaving.
Tell them.
The executive walks him to the door, puts his arm around his shoulder, sincerely wishes him luck in his debate, and then drops this bomb: "Please see me again later in the spring. I should like to place an order with you for fuel."
Boom. Naffel walked in as an enemy looking for debate prep, and he walked out with a massive, unprompted corporate contract. So, what does this all mean?
What's the takeaway?
It means that discovering what someone is proud of is the ultimate master key for unlocking hostile doors. It goes back to the philosopher John Dewey, who argued that the deepest urge in human nature is the desire to be important.
The desire to be important.
When Naffel asked the executive to explain his business model, he was implicitly saying, "Your life's work is important enough that I need to understand it." When Walters brought the stamps, he was saying, "Your role as a father is important." When you validate someone's importance in an area they deeply care about, their defensive armor shatters, and they reward you with unprecedented cooperation.
The practical application here is profound. If you have a stubborn client, an impossible manager, or even a neighbor you're constantly bickering with, stop attacking their armor. Do some digging. Observe their office, look at their social media, listen to the throwaway comments they make before a meeting starts.
Find the clues.
Exactly. What do they care about outside of this conflict? Do they breed show dogs? Are they obsessed with restoring classic cars? Do they coach their kids' Little League team? The next time you see them, ask for their advice on that specific topic. Let them play the role of the expert. Give them the floor to talk about their hidden passion. You will be astonished at how rapidly the ice thaws and how quickly the hostility turns into collaboration.
Okay, we have spent a lot of time analyzing grand, high-stakes scenarios. Winning over famous authors, breaking through to paranoid emperors, securing confidential banking reports, and closing massive fuel contracts.
The big stuff.
But I want to pivot to the micro level, because if we are honest, most of us are not negotiating with corporate presidents or exiled royalty every single day. Most of our lives are made up of very small, mundane interactions: the barista, the customer service rep, the coworker we pass in the hallway. How does this principle of genuine interest live in the small moments, and does it even matter on that micro scale?
Oh, it might matter even more on the micro scale, because genuine interest cannot just be a tactical weapon you pull out during a hostage negotiation. If you only deploy it when you want a massive payout, it ceases to be genuine. It becomes sociopathic manipulation.
That's a really good point.
The true power of this principle is found in making it a daily, unconscious habit. It is about making thousands of micro investments in the people around you. These small moments build a massive compound interest foundation of goodwill, loyalty, and true human connection over time.
The text highlights some beautiful examples of these daily habits, starting with something as basic as answering the telephone. It notes that the New York Telephone Company, the same people who discovered the eye epidemic, trained their operators to answer the phone with a very specific tone. They were trained to say hello in a way that radiated genuine pleasure and enthusiasm at hearing from the caller.
Just that single word.
Just that single word, delivered with the right nonverbal energy, signals to the caller, "I am interested in you and I am glad you exist."
Think about the contrast in your own life. How often do you call a business or even a friend and they answer with a flat, exhausted, irritated hello?
Ugh, all the time.
Instantly, your brain processes that signal and concludes, I'm a burden, I am interrupting them. Your energy drops and the interaction starts from a deficit. But when someone answers the phone with warmth, it sets a completely different psychological trajectory. It builds immediate trust. The text provides another fantastic story about this kind of micro-loyalty in the banking sector.
Oh, the Madeline Rosedale story.
Yes, Madeline Rosedale became a fiercely loyal, lifelong depositor at a specific bank. Now, was it because they offered the best interest rates? Was it their cutting-edge financial products or their convenient parking lot?
Nope. It had nothing to do with the actual business of banking. It was entirely because an employee at that bank took the time to talk to her son. The employee noticed the boy, showed genuine interest in him, and validated him. That tiny spark of human interest was enough to secure the mother's financial loyalty for life.
It's incredible.
It proves that we care deeply about the people who care about the people we love. We will bypass better technical features or better prices just to do business with someone who actually sees us as human beings.
Precisely. But the most moving example in the entire chapter, the one that truly crystallizes the profound, life-altering impact of these small gestures, is the story of Martin Ginsburg.
This story completely stopped me in my tracks when I read it.
It is incredibly powerful. Martin Ginsburg was recounting a memory from his childhood. He was a 10-year-old boy, and he was spending Thanksgiving Day in a hospital ward. He was poor, he was suffering from a painful condition, he was terrified, and he knew that his mother couldn't afford to take the day off work to come visit him.
Heartbreaking.
So you have a 10-year-old child lying alone in a hospital bed on a major holiday, pulling the covers over his head and crying quietly into his pillow. It is the absolute depths of despair and isolation for a child.
His environment is telling him that he does not matter, that he's entirely alone in the universe.
Yeah.
And then a student nurse walks into the ward.
A student nurse. Her technical job was just to check his vitals, adjust his chart, and move on to the next bed. But she didn't just look at the chart. She looked at the boy. She uncovered his head, she wiped away his tears, and she took a genuine, profound interest in him. She leveled with him, telling him how lonely she felt having to work on Thanksgiving away from her own family.
They connected with him.
She brought him 2 trays of dinner so they could eat together. She sat by his bed, she talked with him, she played games with him, and she stayed with him for hours until her shift finally ended at 4 p.m.
She gave him the only currency that actually mattered in that moment, her undivided, non-transactional attention. And the text notes that Martin Ginsburg, writing about this event decades later as a grown man, said that that single act of genuine interest remained a defining, beautiful memory of his entire life.
Decades later.
Think about that. That student nurse probably forgot about the interaction a week later. She was just doing her job and acting like a decent human being. But for Martin, that micro-investment of interest was a lifeline that altered his memory of his childhood.
It perfectly encapsulates a quote from the ancient Roman poet Publius Syrus that the author includes toward the end of the chapter. Syrus wrote, "We are interested in others when they are interested in us. It is a fundamental law of reciprocity."
It is beautifully, perfectly cyclical. You give a little interest, you get a little back. You leave a trail of these sparks of gratitude, as the text calls them, in your daily routine, and they snowball into lifelong trust, fierce loyalty, and deep connection. So I want to issue a very specific challenge to the listener.
Let's hear it.
Sometime in the next 24 hours, I want you to actively apply this. When the next person calls you, whether it's your spouse, a client, or a spam caller, answer the phone with actual audible enthusiasm. Make them feel like their call is the highlight of your afternoon. Or, when you get to the office, remember a specific detail about a coworker's life, their kid's soccer game, their weekend project, and ask them about it with genuine curiosity.
Just be like Tippy the dog.
Exactly. Treat them the way Tippy the dog treats the author. Leave a trail of these sparks and watch how rapidly the atmospheric pressure around you changes.
It will change your reality.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today. We started with the evolutionary biology of the eye epidemic and Tippy the golden retriever. We moved through Alfred Adler's warnings about human failure, Howard Thurston's internal cognitive management, the costly signaling of the Brooklyn authors, the psychological judo of stamp collecting, and finally, the profound impact of a student nurse on Thanksgiving.
A lot of ground.
If we take all of these seemingly disparate stories and synthesize them into one core philosophy, what is the soul of this chapter?
The thread that connects the dog, the stage magician, the fuel salesman, and the nurse is a fundamental shift in how you view your role in the world. The grand illusion of society is that influence requires you to build a towering monument to your own ego so that the world will stop and applaud you.
But it's an illusion.
It is. The actual physics of human relations dictate the exact opposite. Influence is not about being the most fascinating person in the room. It is about being the most fascinated person in the room. The skeleton key that opens any door, whether it's the door to a corporate boardroom, a royal castle, or a stranger's heart, is the willingness to step out of your own ego and genuinely, sincerely validate the existence, the passions, and the struggles of the person standing in front of you.
It's powerful.
When you do that without an agenda, you fulfill the deepest psychological craving of the human condition. And in return, as the chapter title promises, you will be welcome anywhere.
Influence is not about being fascinating. It is about being fascinated. That is the perfect summary. You now understand the deep neurological and psychological reasons why genuine interest gets your foot in the door, and how asking about a hidden passion can melt a rival's armor. But it begs a new question. How do you instantly signal that warmth and interest before you even have the chance to speak a single word?
The next step.
Next time, we're going to explore a physiological technique that costs absolutely nothing to produce, but was literally valued by the industrialist Charles Schwab at $1 million.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, somewhat provocative thought to mull over. We have spent this entire session analyzing how showing interest in others acts as a tool to build relationships, increase your influence, and achieve professional success. We've framed it as a strategy for navigating the external world.
Right.
But consider the internal implications. What if the act of forcing yourself to be genuinely fascinated by others doesn't just change how the world views you, but actually rewires your own neuroplasticity? When you are constantly obsessed with your own image, your own status, and your own anxieties, you are carrying a crushing cognitive and emotional burden.
That is so true.
What if the act of turning the camera outward and focusing on the beauty and complexity of other people is actually the ultimate cure for your own anxiety? What if the real ultimate beneficiary of this rule is you?
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.